You're strong.
I know.
It's okay. I've got you now.
Just like in the
Welcome
movies.
to SuperWonder Legacy and the first piece of Comics League content in 2024. I am Jared. I'm here with Britt. What's up, Britt?
Hello, hello.
Now, I don't know about you, Britt, but I'm feeling I'm feeling like I'm having a crisis right about now. And so Britt and I have been very clear that we've been very critical of the post-crisis era of DC, which is basically Crisis on Infinite Earths up until Flashpoint. We've been very critical of this particular period of DC, and we're going to basically outline why, and then we're going to have some fun with the good parts that post-crisis did. So I'll share the PowerPoint, and we can get this crazy train rolling. So to start off, Britt, what is post-crisis?
All right, so post-crisis is basically when it's from 1985 through 86, the Crisis on Infinite Earth. They rebooted their whole entire continuity, erased everything, starting all over. Basically starting from a blank. Closing out pre-crisis. Didn't they send them to Earth 2? They're basically like pre-crisis now,
Yeah.
Earth 2.
Pre-crisis is Earth 2.
Yeah, and they either married characters off and then killed them, or or they might have had a happy ending or something like that. Yeah, so with post-crisis, the first thing we have is Superman. And what Superman needed, he needed retooling, because his, of course, popularity started dwindling just a little bit, because as we talked about, the information from the DC documentary was Marvel is basically, kicking DC's butt. So they needed some type of boost. And they wanted to, the fans that Marvel was gaining, they wanted that. So they basically Marvelized their DC universe. Superman was first with John Byrne. He stripped Superman of any type of creative idea that he had. His Kryptonian legacy, heritage, all of that was wiped away, and he was just basically a man who happened to have powers.
So this is the birth of the Clark is who I am, Superman is what I can do mindset.
Yeah, and he really wanted, honestly, it was kind of like a self-insertion in the opposite way of the self-insertion that Seagal had. Seagal, he embraced being an immigrant. Byrne pretty much hated being an immigrant, and he felt like if you embrace that and wanted to know about your heritage, you was ungrateful for being American. So he basically wanted to big up America, like, Superman is supposed to be the poster boy for this all-American perfect male, and he has powers. So and to this day, you kind of feel that xenophobic narrative that if you are a foreigner and you're a powerful foreigner, you're bad. So if you are,
that's a fundamental misunderstanding on DC's part of, well, for one thing, America, because the ideals of America, granted the country doesn't always live up to those ideals, is that you show up and you contribute what makes your culture great to our culture. With Superman, you show up on this planet as a refugee and you contribute what makes you special to the world, which is security. So it's not like you abandon your heritage. It really, yeah, you're right. It is kind of problematic when you think about it.
Yes. And also, like, with him being born, he it was the birthing matrix. So
Mhm.
he technically, so he can be like like a earthbound American of, you know, he had him birth on American soil. I think
Mm.
in the rocket or whatever, instead of pre-crisis or whatever, when he's like 2 years old, he is rocketed. He isn't even a baby being rocketed. And I just thought that was so weird. Like, I mean, I understand if you have difficulties with your heritage or you want to have that acceptance, but you are um taking care of someone else's character. Like, even though you are the writer, this character belongs to not just DC as a company, but the fans. And the fans are of different cultures.
And
So
and
you
that's the
can't,
problem. That's the problem with a lot of DC writers even now, is that they think that they can just ignore the legacy, pun intended, of these characters.
yeah. So with Superman, he was, and I guess he isn't wrong for that, but when Tom King with the Wonder Woman 80th anniversary story,
Hmm.
when he had this joke about Superman being a cop, and that's basically, but in a very derogatory type way of being very stiff, of
Hmm.
being um just like the protector of the status quo. No matter how problematic it is, you have to enforce the law,
Do you know what
you
that
know?
probably was? So, and I'll get into this when we talk about Batman, but it's like the role Superman had in Dark Knight Returns, which was a enforcer for the status quo, that was super popular. So DC's like, let's roll with that. Even though, say what you want about Dark Knight Strikes Again, they at least like explained why he's so rah working for the government in a way that makes sense to Superman's character. He's not just like, oh, the big blue Boy Scout. America must always be right. America.
Well, that is actually what Frank Miller was trying to portray because he took influence from Byrne.
Mm-hmm.
That
Okay.
it Yeah, so anybody who actually thinks that Frank Miller started that, no, it was the reverse because when Frank was successful, he actually he's the one that actually wanted to do Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think no, after Returns, he wanted to have a go with Superman, but never got the chance to kind of like counter how he wrote Superman in Returns. Um, but yeah, it was basically a a parody of what John was doing with Superman in main continuity. So yeah, if you I know that a lot of fans want to put blame on Frank Miller for his over the top, you know, stuff. But if you read his interviews, if you read between the lines of his work, he is just taking what has already happened and just basically magnifying or emphasizing on it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Even with Wonder Woman, he with her, I would say because Returns was in Batman's perspective
Mm-hmm.
and her man hating and her being on an island of all women, that whole thing was the oversimplification of her character and he was making fun of it. But they actually have that within post crisis too. And for fans who just are um making post-crisis like the golden standard or whatever. It's like,
It's not. If it were the
yeah,
golden standard, they wouldn't have had a reboot. I got
exactly.
news for you.
And the thing is, now you have the fans who oversimplify the characters, especially with Superman. You can't have any type of conflict with him. Even Mark Wade, he was like,
God.
this Superman, our prime Superman, cannot make any mistakes. He can't be flawed. It's like, so what kind of character is he? How can
So
he
how is he going to be
grow?
relatable? See, that mindset is exactly why it's really hard for people to get Superman. And even like case in point, I was talking to my sister recently about this stuff, and then she said, "Well, I don't really like Superman. He seems kind of boring and everything. Everything always goes right for him." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the issue because here's the thing." Even if you read post crisis, Superman makes a lot of mistakes in that line, and it makes the character more relatable. The audience, in reality, I would, I'm fairly certain the majority of the actual audience, not the people that complain on Twitter or X or whatever he's going to call it next, the majority of the audience wants Superman to make mistakes because it shows that because when you have a character that's so perfect that everything goes right for him, that leads to a very boring ass character. That's why Man of Steel was so good. That's why New 52 did well, because he let Clark grow into being Superman and make mistakes.
Yeah, and with post-crisis Superman, he he's like you said, this rah rah go America, all American. He was a football star. He, he didn't grow until into his powers. Like, even if he thought of himself as like being an alien or being different was wrong, it it was like he was so hell bent on like trying to disregard that. And it's like, I am an American, I am a Kent, that's all I am. But yet it is one page from that where he says that Krypton, I think he said Krypton bred me, but Earth or something raised me. And he's standing there in the Superman suit, and you have your chest sticking out with the L crest, and it's like, so you are basically talking bad about your heritage as a Kryptonian while having the L crest, family crest on your chest right now.
Yeah,
I
if you
just
don't
found
like
that,
being Kryptonian, why the hell are you wearing the suit then?
yeah. And then it was the fact of with as far as his dating life, it was like Clark Kent, he had to be just with like humans in order for him to be relatable. He had to, even with the idea of being with Diana, it was like it was a bait and switch, of course. Of course. And the differences was very contrived.
Mhm.
And he thought of himself as just a farm boy from Kansas. Like, no, it's not the fact that I'm a refugee from another world and I can't relate to you with being a refugee or, an immigrant and outsider. I am just this American boy who grew up in a small town. I'm a little simple minded, but it's kind of like, again, you're disregarding that you are a son of a scientist. You have super intelligence. You have this, with all of this, even the Fortress of Solitude is like, why do you have all this stuff that you have access to, but yet again you are belittling it? That the whole Superman post-crisis background just was a big old contradiction to the character himself.
Well, not only
So
that, you also had, and this is one of the sins of post-crisis Superman, is that they started to rehash storylines. Case in point, so after Superman died and came back to life, Jurgens was on the book, and whenever he wrote Superman, do a variant of Doomsday or the Black Suit or any of those of the characters associated with the death and return to Superman had to show up, which is why I, admittedly, refer to Jurgen sometimes as a one-trick pony, because even if you look at his Rebirth Superman run going into that, Doomsday shows up in the first arc. So I'm like,
but you have to remember, it's like you have to remember. It was like a "do you remember me" type thing.
yeah, it's like,
you know?
remember me? I did that. And I'm like, yeah, everyone remembers it because you remind us of it every 30 seconds. Now, to be clear, Superman post-crisis had some really dope storylines, like For Tomorrow, which I still maintain is actually pretty good. You had The Secret Origin of Geoff Johns. You had Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. I'm referring to it as the movie title. Actually, for that matter, the entire Superman Batman storyline, where you had like Public Enemies, the reemergence of Supergirl, you had some pretty dope stuff and some good like SuperWonder moments. But it's just the problem is it was pretty much all time. Those were few and far between for the stories where he practically worships Lois, or is just the whole little hand on my shoulder, like, this is like a job for me.
Or even the fact that at some points, like when he's a grown man, and there's no issue with that, with going to your parents for advice. But
Yeah,
at the same time, if you are just with every little thing going to your parents and acting like you need to be handheld,
he's a mama's boy then.
yeah, and that's not right. And then yeah, with Lois, it was like he's stagnant. I'm not saying be like a player or anything like that. How like Batman, he is committed to Selena, but at the same time, you know, Batman has this persona playboy type thing. I'm not saying that Superman is like that, because he's not. He's no. But the obsession, though, that every few issues it had to be established that Lois is the only one. Even if it was like out of nowhere. It's like at that time you had to remember, especially when you had guest appearances of Wonder Woman in the
Yeah,
Superman books.
because you
It's
know
like,
why? Because they had to keep reminding you, no, it's Lois. Lois is the one for him, because they knew that the minute they put Wonder Woman in a book with Superman, people are going to start thinking, you know what? Do we really need Lois? Because these two actually look pretty good together.
right. I believe it is Chuck Austin,
Hmm.
his Action Comics, when and there's a storyline where Superman, he fights Magog, and then he gets beat up pretty badly, so a bunch of um villains go after him, and he's sitting there in the infirmary, or and I think he was in Star Labs, and Superboy and Wonder Woman there with him, and he asks her, does she love him?
Ah, I love
And
that.
she says, of course, but then it's the page turner or whatever is, but I love him like in a platonic way. Can't the woman and a man just be friends? And it's very heavy-handed.
The problem with that, I would believe that if she were not like affectionately stroking his brow. That's the first thing. But look at the way she's sitting on the bed and the way she's drawn. I'm like, yeah, you're doing a really hard
Exactly.
job of convincing me, Wonder Woman.
Right. But the thing is, there was an interview with Austin, and he said that it he didn't like the marriage to Lois. Okay. Pretty much nobody liked the marriage with Lois.
Because they have
It
good
was
taste.
right. And it was the fact that it felt very limiting, and it just, yeah, it felt like the end of the story. And with them not being able to have kids, that was established. So no, John Kent does not supposed to, he doesn't supposed to exist.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
um so he wanted to do like a love triangle, love square or whatever, with Clark, Lois, Diana, and Lena. But of course, Greg Rucka, he said no, leave Diana out of it, because of course he has this weird interest with trying to put Diana with Batman, and it's like in the most shallowest way possible, and reverse or twist the Trinity dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so he basically told him to keep Diana out of the river, and he kind of did, kind of didn't, of course. But yeah, that whole bait and switch is it. A lot of times with Superman and Wonder Woman within post crisis, of course they had to um they had to respect the marriage, but even before then, going back to Byrne and Perez, I believe Perez is the one that wanted the relationship. So yes, post crisis at the beginning, just like how the 52 did in the 80s, the beginning, they were setting up Superman and Wonder Woman to be a couple. But it
Yeah.
was a bait and switch.
And
Because of Superman being the, I guess, the more popular character, so it fell in line with what they wanted to do with him.
I guess. But it is nice to know that most of the really talented people at DC have been pushing for Superman and Wonder Woman like forever. So R.I.P. George Perez, you're awesome. But and then we get complete and utter garbage like Immortal Beloved, which I'm like,
Yeah,
my problem
yeah,
with that is that okay, you're staring at each other romantically. You know there's gonna be an intense battle. You know that likely 1,000 years has passed and you can't, as far as they know, you can't go back. And then you say, no, I'm sorry, Diana, it'll always be Lois. As far as you know, Lois is dead. What the hell? Your obligation to her is done. What do you
the
do?
thing is,
Is this somehow supposed to sound romantic? Because it doesn't.
honestly, it doesn't. The only people that think that's romantic is Lois and Clark fans, but that honestly is very unhealthy, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very codependent. And the thing is, with that story, it was writing yourself in a corner, because knowing the ending of them going back home, it it would have been labeled as cheating though, so they couldn't have done that.
Well, technically, no. They could have explained it as he didn't know he was going to go back home. He didn't know he had that
He
capability.
Yeah, he didn't, but at the same time, with the writer knowing it, it would have
Ah,
been cheating.
true.
So yeah, so you didn't want that. Um, and that's why honestly, if you're gonna write yourself in a corner like that and you know the ending that you want, don't write it.
Then don't give them that like moment. Just have them going, okay, see ya, good night. I'll see you at the battle tomorrow. That's all you got to do. But the
Right.
very fact that you have them staring very, very romantically at each other. By the way, another moment of bearded Superman, and it does look really good.
Yeah. Well, he's always, isn't it honestly that he always has a beard like when he's around Diana because she
Yeah, which
likes
is
it.
kind of funny. Yeah, yeah, which is kind of funny. It's like he has like the ability to manifest a beard at will when she's around.
Yeah, and he kind of, I mean, it's not even a hyper. I remember when a Lois fan, she said that Kingdom Come Superman is hyper masculine in a negative way. And it was kind of like, okay, so there's no hyper masculinity about it. He's just being a man or being strong. Just because he isn't like needing to be handheld or he isn't sulking, with Diana. He's actually being a leader. He's
He's
actually,
moving on and doing his
yeah, he's
freaking job.
and being strong and everything like that. That does not equate to being hyper masculine. Um, it's just a weird double standard, you know, way about their line of thinking when they want to go against Superman and Wonder Woman being together. So
Mhm.
with that storyline, with any storyline that DC kind of try to throw out there, as a bait and switch or as to say that Lois is the only one, it really just piles on the idea that Superman is so boring. Like
Mhm.
you have no creativity whatsoever. Um, Even with the marriage was to it was to coincide with the 90s show, Dean Kane's show, and they wanted to get rid of it. Like I believe a year right afterwards or something.
Hmm.
And even with the show, when they got married, that show ratings torpedoed. It was like they weren't interested in that. So that's the same thing that happened in comics. You torpedo sales, not only Superman sales, but also comic sales and the whole market with Death of Superman.
And we'll get to there.
But also with the marriage, even that just tanked the character.
Exactly. So, moving on to our favorite DC lady, Diana. Now, I will say, so I believe it was the Perez run that started her post-crisis like career, if I'm remembering correctly. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
hell of a
So
start, because that was great.
yeah, so here now this is more positive because with pre-crisis Wonder Woman, she she already had the issues of the whole judge of being judged with the whole bondage thing. She had the
Mm-hmm.
mod error of losing her powers. She had with the back and forth of trying to force her with Steve and him dying and her uh basically wanting to give up everything. So what they did with pre-crisis Wonder Woman was they married her off to Steve. I believe they did have a daughter, but she kind of like she was there but wasn't. So
Mm-hmm.
even that, they totally erased her and made her someone else's daughter. And um her and Steve got married and ascended to Olympus, and then they killed him off. And that's what happened to pre-crisis Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but her sales were so bad. I believe that they canceled her book for like a year. And but the thing is, I believe that contractually they're supposed to keep her books going for with the agreement with the Marston family.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to find someone to, write her book. And Perez, he was up for the challenge to give her, revitalize this character that has so much potential. So what he did was he just wiped everything. He gave the Amazons, it was pretty problematic because the beauty of the Amazons' birth are that they are Earth women, but they dealt with abuse and were murdered, but reincarnation of those women.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but then Hercules turned them into slaves and he did, assault Hippolyta. And that is why the Amazons wear the bracelets.
Mm-hmm.
But Hippolyta ends up falling in love with Hercules. So that's a total different
Yeah,
thing,
that
but
was
it's
the one part when I was reading the first omnibus, and I was like, "What?"
yeah, that's kind of weird, but at that time in the 80s, okay, when you're even with the movies in general and cartoons or anything like that, the 80s and further back are very problematic. So it's some stuff that got away in some things that
Yeah.
were, went over everyone's head or you can get away with at that time. But
Holy
now we
Stockholm
see.
syndrome, Batman.
So, yeah.
That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, right. So that was one aspect. And then he did kind of, I guess the technology part of it, though, they didn't have too much of that. Um, but it was very vastly cultured with the women, though, that
Mhm.
you did have the women being celebrated. And another thing is that Steve's mother, she crash lands on the island first.
I love that.
And that is what prompts Hippolyta to name Diana after her.
And the suit,
And
if I'm remembering correctly, right?
yes, and the suit. And then, ironically, of course, years later, Steve crash lands on there. And he's an older man, and he's married to Etta.
Well,
Diana,
he wasn't married yet. They got
well, not
together
yet,
during that run.
right. But he's still a much older man.
Yeah.
And Diana is basically like, I want to take him home. Just,
I
if there
want to
was
take
no
him
room.
home to my mother who trains with swords. That's a good idea.
And she meets Julia and Vanessa, who take her in, takes her in as like, I guess Julia was pretty much like a teacher. She taught Diana how
Yeah.
to speak English, how to read in English, just things like that. And again, Steve was very much older. He was more like a father figure. I believe in Perez, I think it's volume 2 or it might be volume 1, but Steve says that Diana is like a little sister to him.
Yep, he does. Which again, this is why when I was reading the Perez run, I thought to myself, and I'm like, I like this Steve a lot more for some reason because he's not like annoying. He's not constantly trying to get with Diana. He's more of a father figure. This is how you make him work.
And if you want that male inspiration or like for Diana, you don't go with the romantic of like her, and that was Perez's sole motivation to make him older, was that doesn't make sense for her to be with the first man she meets. She's not a Disney princess. She might be a princess, but she's not a Disney princess. And it's just a little weird. And it's like, that's not really love or anything like that. It's infatuation. And then with Steve too, it's like you are going within the fantasy, of this man, he crash lands on an island of women, and then the princess he ends up with. That whole male fantasy thing, that's just as problematic too. So with them having that big brother, little sister, or father figure, mentor type relationship, you have more respect for it. And honestly, that is why I like Steve, that version of Steve. I don't like the love interest Steve because
for one thing, for me, it's because he's a stalker in the New 52. So I'm like, well, you don't want to
yeah,
encourage this, DC.
he was a stalker in New 52, possessive, and also, I mean, New 52 was a mix of Golden Age and Bronze Age, and a little bit of Silver Age too. So yeah, they basically took the worst of Steve and made as he originally was, and just brought him back to how he originally was. But yeah, I really don't like Steve only if he was older. Even now, and even with the movie, Diana, she only knew him for a couple of days, and she acted like she was so in love with him. He dies, and it basically made it seem like he was the hero of the movie. And then you have 84, where she's obsessed with a dead man that she barely knew for like over 60 years. And she gives up her powers for a man. The whole body snatcher storyline of,
Oh God. You mean the attempt to do Big, but you forgot that even Big kind of, you can't make a movie like Big anymore.
Yeah. And then at the end, she sees the man that Steve took over his body. No, that's just something that Wonder Woman should not have any type of storyline.
Well, also add on to the fact, and Nick from the Phoenix Press, one of the other Coast of Comics League, actually brought up that there was a subplot, or this may have been Jahid, but the point is, there was a subplot in that the dude may have been LGBT.
Oh no, for real?
I think I haven't seen it yet. I didn't pick up on that when I recently rewatched the movie, but if that's in there, that's pretty bad.
And then the credits though, his name is just the handsome man. So it's kind of like it's even more problematic. So not only does that happen, but if he is with LGBT and then he's just called the handsome man, I mean, that is just, yeah.
Stereotypical. It's like whenever Hollywood tries to give representation to gay people, it's always the most stereotypical version
Oh
ever,
man, that is
which is
awful.
annoying. So again, so yes, the post-crisis Wonder Woman started off good, and you had some pretty good writers on this. Obviously, you had Perez, you had some parts of Rucka, you had
Jimenez.
you had Jimenez. Jimenez's run is great. I read Paradise Lost and Paradise Found, so I read that part where she's comforting Superman after she fights him. That's awesome. I liked some parts of the Simone run, but there are some parts that I don't like. So let's get on to that. The problem with is that, like Superman, it did lead to stale storytelling because they started to rehash the same stuff. But the real problem with Wonder Woman is that they started to put too much emphasis on her romances, like with Tom Tresser, who was a big douchebag. But then you also have like the forced wonder bath from like Blackest Night, which we'll get to when we cover Green Lantern. But it's like they kept trying to go, who will she date now? And I'm like,
Well,
so you're only doing that because she's the girl character. I get it.
well, that's the thing is that with Superman not being available, and that was even
Nice.
said, that was even said in one of the, I think, JSA
Yeah,
issues.
during the Brad Meltzer run of JLA, they did a crossover with, I think it was the Legion of Superheroes and JSA. It was like this big epic crossover. I think it was called the Lightning Saga or something like that. And Diana's talking to, I believe it's Stargirl, and the Stargirl they're talking about Diana's relationships, and she's like, "Hey, how about Superman? Oh, he's unavailable."
Yeah,
The funny part about that,
I actually,
that's the only thing Diana says. That's the other thing. She doesn't say he's unavailable, and I only really consider him a friend. No, 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 no. She just says he's unavailable. Ends
I
it at that.
actually, I actually posted those images on Instagram, and what she says is, they are watching Superman fight Bizarro, and yeah,
Oh,
Stargirl.
that's another time where that happens. But it was also in another thing, ironically,
Oh, really?
also involving the JSA. Yeah, because post Infinite Crisis, they relaunched the Justice League after the 52 series. And this is where you had like Black Canary leading the team. You had Vixen. You had Red Arrow. Obviously, the Trinity, Red Tornado, and again, the members of the Legion of Superheroes start showing up, and they're like scattered. So the JLA and JSA are trying to like team up and get them. But what happens is they're walking through like a thing, and one woman's talking about her relationships, and then Stargirl is talking about, well, how about Superman? He's unavailable.
Oh, that was Lady Liberty.
Oh, okay, yeah. Actually, hang on. I'll pull up the trade so I can see if I can find it because I have the edition. But go on with your thing.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, with post-crisis, Superman and Wonder Woman was supposed to be a couple, but again, things change. I believe Byrne did want him to be with Lena, not Lois, but even with that, even with Lena, even with Lena, it was like no, because I think after
here we go. So she's talking to Liberty Bell, and
Liberty Bell.
Yeah, and Wonder Woman goes, marriage isn't a concept I grew up around, Jess. And then Jess goes, what about Superman? You two were made for each other. He's unavailable. That's it.
Wow. So they basically said the same thing in the one with Stargirl. Was she said in that they were watching Superman fight Bizarro, and Stargirl says he's hot. What do you think? um, what what do you think, Wonder Woman? And Diana is kind of like stares for a minute, and then she says, "He's a good man. He's just a good man." And then afterwards, Stargirl continues on with, people are always talking about you and him, Wonder Woman and Superman, like you belong together. And then Power Girl says, yeah, their costumes match. Well, Power Girl is from another Earth, so
Mhm.
Stargirl does make the weird kind of assumption that, what about you two? And then she says, like kissing my cousin. So, no, that's weird. And Stargirl goes back to Wonder Woman and says, well, Wonder Woman, um, would you ever? So, Diana, she says, become romantically involved with Cal. She says, I am the ambassador of peace. I'm the ambassador of peace for Themyscira. I don't have time for romance. So Paragirl retorts and says, whoa, like, that's not dodging the question.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
love that. By the way, I just love the idea they're just watching him fight Bizarro, like from the bushes, like hubba hubba. I just love that. I can picture that. He's like I can imagine he's fighting Bizarro. He's getting a little exerted, maybe a little sweating. Not really because he's Superman. And then on the side is just Power Girl, Star Girl, and Wonder Woman just watching him. They're like, "Where's my popcorn? Flash, get me popcorn."
right. That, I mean, those are the moments that within post crisis that was good. Like the more seeing the heroes act more like friends and family, and these kind of moments you can relate to. But yeah, that whole thing, I did not know that there were two different instances of the same exact thing being said.
Yeah,
So
and
you
the funny
have,
part is that immediately after Diana says he's unavailable, then Liberty Bell proposes the next person, the next person. So she didn't say, and I just really consider him a dear friend. She just says he's unavailable, period.
so it's kind of like, well, if he was available, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Even
So
though,
I'm like, wait a second here. So in a way, Britt, Lois Lane ruined the Wonder Woman books as well.
yeah, because you had these, you have these, like Rucka, and he was, it's like, um, I think in one story, this is when Hippolyta dies again, or she
Mm-hmm.
is dead. And yeah, I believe this is Rocca. And Clark brings Martha, um, Martha baked a pie, and he brings it to Diana. And they talk about death, coming back to life, and how people believe that they are supposed. I think I'm putting two scenes together, but they are similar. It's
Mm-hmm.
one where they eat pie, and then there's another where they're flying, and but they both say that, the tabloids or whatever, or people think that we're together, and so they have to say, well, they don't know a friendship like ours. A man and woman can be just friends, but it's like, well, first of all, honestly, if everyone is thinking that you are together or something.
Maybe it's the way you are around each other because they are very hands-on with each other. They're always hugging, they're always like very intimately holding each other. So even I was like, wait, that's why whenever they say, that's why in that scene where Wonder Woman goes, I only love him as a friend. Boys and girls can be friends too. I wish someone said, but look at the way you are together.
Right. And it has something to do with the art too,
Mm-hmm.
because the artist, just as Bertel said about Wonder Woman 800, she was like, well, I was told to draw this like this, and whether they are, friends or romance or whatever, and you can take that panel and you can be like, oh yeah, they are a couple, but they aren't actually a couple in the context of continuity. um but then you have Conrad that confirmed that you can read it in in an ambiguous way because of how handsy they were in the art itself and the dialogue too. Um, but yeah, with Post Crisis, I think even with you mentioned For Tomorrow, it was like that art. It definitely made it seem like that is not Lois. That is definitely drawn
Well, not only
like
that,
Diana.
when he's fighting Diana in that book, he gets really close to her and he goes, "Listen, I need you to trust me, please. Trust me. Trust that what I'm doing is the right thing." And she's like, "Okay."
Yeah, there are moments too where they are very the dialogue between them is very much it's not very friendly. Um
Mm-hmm.
there's more feeling and emotion in it. Even when Bruce died and Diana sat with Clark while he was on top of, I think, a roof or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked him, "Is he okay?" And he said, "I just want to sit here for, for some time." And she just says, "Okay," and sits with him, and the way it's drawn too, with the sunset or whatever, and them just right there. It gave, yeah, it was an emotional and sad moment, but it also gave a little bit of romantic feel to it
Well, not only
too.
that, remember when they're fighting the army of Doomsdays in the Supergirl arc, and and he like unleashes his heat vision, like annihilates them, and he's down on his knees, and then Wonder Woman basically kneels beside him and puts her hand on his shoulder. That they kind of really nerfed in the animated movie because they didn't want to show any
Right,
romanticness.
right. That hug from that, she was kneeling and kind of over him in a sense and holding him, yeah, in a very romantic sort of way. Um, even in, what's that? Let me see. It is a Christmas special,
Mm-hmm.
and they are sparring, I
Oh
think,
God!
in
Are
the
you talking about
Arctic.
the image where like their breaths are even intertwining when they're that close to each other?
Yeah, they're in the
Oh
Arctic,
boy!
and she's like on top of him, whatever, and he's. It very much looks
Clark is
like,
thinking baseball, cold showers, baseball,
yeah,
cold showers.
she like has his hands pinned or his arms pinned, and she's just like, yeah, in a very provocative type way. And um he holds out his hand for her to take, and then he gives her a the hammer that he crafted himself, and it's basically a follow up to the Immortal Beloved story,
I'm like, at
and
least you
it's
gave me this. If you didn't do it in the story, at least you gave me this.
but also the last image though, it looks like they are like, it's not the way it's drawn. Again, it's so much ambiguity with Superman and Wonder Woman, whether it's the dialogue or the art. But it looks like they're hugging, but it also looks like they're kissing. So it's kind of
Yeah,
weird.
it's just a silhouette, so it's not clear at all, particularly the way they were drawn in that entire issue. I was like, yeah, you're not fooling anyone, whoever drew this.
Yeah, but you can kind of see their faces. It's a silhouette, but it's still, and it doesn't look like a hug either. It looks like their faces are together in
Yeah,
a
it
kiss.
looks like their heads are one. But speaking of artists coming up with Super Wonder, so tell me about this one shot called Rendezvous.
Okay, so in 1990, Perez, he's the one that wanted Clark and Diana to be together. And when it fell apart, he actually have in story where Diana is on a plane and she's thinking of Clark. And she's like, she, in a sense, for that moment, Diana is a mouthpiece for Perez in a good way, because she basically talks about how she met Clark and she was so happy to meet him that she thought that he was going to be the person that she could really bond with romantically. And even before they went on a date, Diana she prayed naked to understand her evolving, or those feelings that she was having for
And what
him.
you didn't know is that higher up in the atmosphere, Clark was looking with his telescopic vision. He's like, oh, he was doing a patrol, and he's like, "Hello there."
That would be very
That would be
interesting.
hilarious. He's like, no. The way Clark could play it off is like he's super bashful. He's like, okay, I'm checking. Oh no, Diana,
Wow,
this is gonna be awkward. By the way, watch out for that mole.
Oh, wow.
That would be hilarious. Oh
So
my
you,
gosh.
so you have Diana praying, you have uh Clark, like, he has an interview after the whole thing, and he basically says that he's not good enough for Diana, that she deserves more than him. And it's part of post-crisis Superman's whole thing of belittling himself. He just thinks that he's a farm boy. He's no more than that. So, but Diana, she sees him for more than, what he perceives himself to be. And she says that he's just like this guardian of the status quo, when they are the ones that's supposed to challenge it and supposed to change it, which basically goes back to Golden Age Superman. He was supposed to be, or he was, the champion of the oppressed, man of the people, challenging the status quo, you know, going after crooked governments, people and everything like that. But then you have post-crisis Superman that's protecting that. That's, like I said, for the law, no matter how problematic it is. And again, belittling himself. So Perez, he still wanted to have um, Superman and Wonder Woman together in some way. And this one shot was, again, with the ambiguity of you can either have it in continuity or not. Either way, you can go either way. And he wanted it to be where in the perspective of the gods, and Clark and Diana have a one night stand. And Diana, she was a virgin, so she would lose her virginity to Clark, and that was it. But of course, it never happened for some reason. But it really would have been a very good, one shot. Probably would have sold thousands,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of thousands. And yeah, if he would have, wish he would have had a chance to do that. Even in Black Label, if somebody could take the story and kind of, you know, I'm pretty sure he probably had a layout or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I
just,
imagine he wrote the script, or at least, yeah. I imagine he had it all written out.
yeah, it's, and the fact that he says that he said, I don't have, I have no intentions, within the quote, he says, of he wanted to explore the mature themes and about, the love that, or the infatuation or anything like that, or the lustful side that these characters feel. And that's the thing too about Superman and Wonder Woman, is that you don't really get the mature themes. Like with Clark, he, again, with Post Crisis, they wanted him to be like this virgin man, um, like waiting for Lois or something. Even though he had Lena as a girlfriend, he had Lori, um, the mermaid, he had other girlfriends, but for some reason he had to be like this, you know, pure for Lois, while Lois ended up with other people though. Even I think she ended up with Lex in Post Crisis.
Oh God.
Yes, stuff like that.
That's where Bendis got that from.
Yeah, and then with Diana, she was basically a version for the whole time. Um, Even if she did have like Tom Treasure, I think even Trevor Barnes,
Mhm.
she, of course, she had like, we had making out and stuff like that, but to actually be, with someone, no, she was not. Tom
Tresser was
Treasure,
so annoying in that run.
yeah, and the fact that what made it bad was for Treasure, he was basically like a worse version of Steve. Or he was a copycat Steve, but more annoying
He's Steve Light.
and
You know it's bad when I prefer Steve.
yeah. And I believe that with that storyline, Diana didn't love Treasure. She just wanted to like have a baby because
Mm-hmm.
I guess at that time of whatever they was trying to make her age to be, that it was time for her to have kids, or they wanted to have like the storyline of kids. So that's it. It was just like just give me a baby or whatever. So honestly, yeah, Diana's love life or whatever is horrible if she's not with, even though Steve is a default because, of course, he's within the mythos and everything like that. But honestly, her only stable, healthy relationship is Clark. You know,
Mm-hmm.
other other than that,
And her consistent relationship that's been there forever since her inception is this guy.
yeah. So I mean, again, we keep going back and forth with the should have, could have, would have, um, ambiguity with the ideas, um, basically cut at the kneecaps. I really, really,
That's the story of SuperWonder right there.
yeah. I mean, this one shot, honestly, I would love to read. I would have preferred it to be drawn by Perez. It could be drawn by honestly Ed Benz. Let Ed Benz go wild.
Yeah, first off, I love the way Ed Benes draws women because they are super caked up in a good way. It's like he draws these beautiful women the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah, and Benz is a SuperWonder fan too. Like
Oh yeah.
he,
So
yeah,
that's just, by the way, fun fact, even David Finch is one because I remember talking to him and I asked him, Wonder Bat or Super Wonder? He goes, Super Wonder.
yeah. Honestly, I think that most artists are more inclined to pick Superman and Wonder Woman because it's such a visual appeal and you can do so much with them. And it's like the art of them, even if you're not trying to be romantic or anything like that, it's still just them standing together
Well, yeah.
give such,
Remember, there was that YouTube clip of Jim Lee that was around the time Justice League 12 was coming out, and they were talking about drawing the cover for it, and he said, well, now that they're together and they're superhuman, I have so many other options I can do. I don't have to have them like walking or him carrying her. We can just have them like this, making out and flying.
yeah, you can do so many more poses. How, I mean, how is it, wouldn't that get boring of drawing Superman carrying Lois all the time in the same
Mhm.
exact pose? There's nothing new to that. Where with Wonder Woman, just like how we had so many covers with Tony Daniel, with the art, the selfie, them, the way that it's
The selfie on the moon.
yeah, even Gulliam, I think his name Gullum,
Mhm.
March, how he did the covers. He had them in space. He had them sitting on top of the Daily Planet. He had Diana. I think she was on Mars or something like that, and she's
Well,
wrapped up in the cape.
you also have the Darwin Cook thing of them eating an
Yes.
apple on an alien planet.
Yeah, you can have them in different places, and just this whole thing, and then the story itself. And this is why writers prefer the stagnant status quo and the basics, because it takes creativity to write. And they want to just put stories out, especially now with
Mhm.
trying to make the deadline. You want to do as fast as you can, or even with trying to get to the story, just like with Action Comics. Philip Kennedy did War World itself. The promise and everything is good.
It's a kick ass because here's the thing, Brett. It's something new.
Yeah, and it's going back to the champion of the oppressed, and he's freeing his people. Is speaking to the aspect of Superman as Moses, as a
Yeah, I
Moses
was about to
allegory.
say it's very much like return to that biblical roots. And then he had to ruin it with the stupid, oh yeah, she keeps the war world suit that was all about liberating slaves. She keeps it for mommy and daddy times. And I'm like, uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean that you. The only reason why he did that was because he was being trolled and everything by Lois fans, thinking that he didn't care, and even he admitted to not caring for Lois's character. He actually liked Lena better.
That's a
So
common
yeah,
theme I've noticed with Superman writers, which, to be clear, if I can't have Wonder Woman, yeah, Lena actually works pretty well because she knew he was Superman longer. She seems like the type of person that knows he's Superman, because she does, and really doesn't care per se. It's like she found love with Clark. Lois found love with Superman.
yeah, and the thing is, with like the what I like about Lena and Diana as like the main love interest is that they care for Clark equally. Clark and Superman. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
he can be honest with both of them. When Lena found out that he had powers and growing up, and also they have this established friendship
Mhm.
that they are best friends. Lena and Clark are childhood best friends, and they have that trust built. Clark and Diana are best friends. They have this trust built as outsiders, as understanding each other. Clark and Lois are not best friends. They aren't even friends. They don't have that established friendship at all. Not even much of trust either, because even with them being engaged, he was still lying. And honestly, I have no idea how she did not know he was Superman. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's because he makes it pretty obvious. And say what you want about Zack Snyder, at least he had pushing Lois. At least he had Lois figure it out in the first movie. And because here's the thing about the way about that particular issue with Lois. She's supposed to be the greatest reporter ever, and she couldn't figure that out. It makes zero sense for the character that DC tells me she is.
yeah, even with the Death of Superman animated movie, you were like close proximity at all times, whatever, with Superman and Clark, and you couldn't tell. And
And you're together to the point where he's considering like marrying you. So the relationship has gone on for a while. And
which still doesn't even make sense.
it doesn't. But the point is, you've been around Clark specifically. And I'm like, you still can't put that together.
Yeah, I mean, all he did, and the scene was so ridiculous and cartoony that it, it's already a cartoon, but I'm just saying it's very cartoony, like Looney Tunes cartoony. As all he did was take off the glasses, and then she's like, she's gasping, and it's like, what?
at least in the Reeves movies, they had stuff happen, like his hand falls in the fire. He uses heat vision to heat up her coffee. He did stuff. He didn't just, I'm Superman. What?
Yeah, yeah, and
Well,
again,
here's the thing. One more thing, real quick. That implies that she's never seen Clark without his glasses on.
yeah, which is
Like,
again, that is
what?
just so weird. But even still, even without the glasses, whether he has them on or off, it's still the fact that whether it was Superman that was carrying her or she's hugging Clark, it's still the body type that feels the same, though. Like,
There's too much. That's why that's one of the many reasons why that movie makes no sense. But besides that, it's because again they tried to cram it, and again someone I forget who, but if you know who you are, give yourself a shout out in the comments. Posted the problem with the Camu is that they try to put post-crisis stories in a New 52 universe, and it doesn't work.
exactly. I
But
mean, that is the same thing with what they did with Rebirth, you
yeah,
know.
and that's why it doesn't work. But so then we get to the death of Superman, and I call it the fall of comics because this was really one of the events that really caused DC to crash. And see, here's the thing. Superman was struggling in terms of sales, and this is my favorite part of the DC documentary, when Mike Carlin's talking about where people are like, how could you kill Superman? When was the last time you bought a Superman comic? I didn't kill him. You did.
Yeah, and the fact that they are so like they could freely admit that this was a gimmick. It not only bought them time for because Dan Jurgens wanted the marriage engagement whatever, and it bought time to coincide with the 90s show, but also yeah, to boost sales, so they decided to kill him. And it's like, so you know that this is a gimmick. And the fact that it didn't last that long, only like what, 3 to 6 months, he's back. The market crashed because now the issues of everyone believing that Superman is permanently, dead or whatever, now it's worthless.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the other problem, is that then you get the return, which was the stupid. I get I get why they brought him back, but the way they brought him back was stupid. Oh, he didn't die. He just went into a Kryptonian healing coma. Because that makes sense. Well, here's the thing. It makes more sense than Superboy Prime punching reality and bringing Jason Todd back to life. More on that later. But that was the original way that Red Hood came back to life, by the way, Britt. I'll
Wow.
get into that more later. But, I mean, and the thing about it, but by the way, the other thing that doesn't line up is that when Sam Liu was talking about why they broke up SuperWonder for that movie, they were like, well, when you look at the death of Superman, it's also a very Lois Lane story, and I'm like, since when? What did we read the same death of Superman story?
No, it was just that James Tucker, he really just wanted the classic, quote unquote, status quo back, and that was the only way to do it.
Well,
honestly,
actually, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And honestly, you can't really have Death of Superman as a story because Diana can bring him back. But the thing is, what they could have done was
Super Doomed.
They could have done, Super Doomed, or they could have done the JLA Power and Glory with Brian Hitch when Diana uses the lightning bolt to bring him back to life. You could have done that. Like, he did die for like 15 minutes and she brought him back to life. That still would have had that emotional effect, and he would have, but because you have to bring in, and even with the reign of Superman, you had Diana be used as a mouthpiece because James Tucker admitted this, that they knew that the breakup was off screen and it came out of nowhere. and fans did not like Lois. So you use Diana to be like, oh, we're friends now, and Clark loves you, but I love Cal. And again, you have the post-crisis thing of I believe it's the Eradicator that Diana's or had like a crush on or something like that.
Wait,
And
what? When was this?
in the Reign of Superman, the sequel, the movie, she or the visor, whichever one has the visor
That's the
on.
Eradicator, but wait, Diana had a crush on the Eradicator?
Yeah. And what it basically was saying was that Diana only cared for the Kryptonian side.
Oh my
And
god.
like and the fact that Eradicator represents Krypton as like this cold, you know, desolate type alien, planet in a bad way. And for her to like him and for her to now call him Cal, it's like that
That
is what
might have been the comics, because I don't think Diana interacted with the Eradicator in the movie.
No, she didn't interact with him in the comics at all, in the original storyline at all. It's the fact that James Tucker wanted to have like this distinctive like
Oh, you
idea of
mean you mean it was an idea he had, but was not implemented in the movie?
what. Okay, so in one scene, Diana and Lois meet at a
At a
restaurant or
cafe.
something like that,
Yeah.
at a cafe, and they're talking, and Diana is propping up Lois as in she's the only one that knows Clark
Mhm.
and how Clark is with her, and for some reason it's making it seem like Clark didn't tell Lois that he was in a relationship with Diana, and it's kind of like he turned a 180 on Diana because obviously we saw he pursued her, they were together, but in for to make Lois seem like the one, it's like Diana never knew about the Kents. She was only knowing just Cal instead of Clark.
Well, that's the other thing, because previous to the Death of Superman movie, we didn't know the Kents even existed in this universe, because we were under the like belief this was the new 52 universe.
Exactly.
It's just
So
it just that's my issue, is that okay, because you had the opportunity, because I would love for once to see an adaptation of the Death of Superman where Superman is with Wonder Woman and stays with Wonder Woman to see how she reacts, and she could do the lightning bolt or something like that, and so do the power and glory thing, or you could just do the Doomsday fight, or just do Superman doomed, do something new with it, because the problem is whenever they do the Death of Superman, it's the exact same damn story, and it gets really annoying.
exactly. So with this, again, Diana is propping up Lois as in she's the only one that knows Clark. Like it's four new Supermen running around and we don't know what to do. They're not the real him, but you know how to get him back. And so Diana says, I have a special bond or a special relationship with Cal, but you or Clark loves you. And it's like, why isn't there a distinction? And then of his name. A name is a name, but he is still one person. So
Mhm.
again, they are distancing that Clark, and even when they were doing where Diana and Clark were doing the sparring thing or the simulator
Mhm.
in Death of Superman, when she was saying how when he was really acting, weird towards her and saying she called him Clark, and he says, "Why did you call me Clark?" And she's like, we're in a simulator. Like, I always, what do you want me to call you? And he says, call me Superman because Lois calls me that or something like that. And it's like, you only want me to call you that because you have this sense of macho-ness with Lois or whatever. And And also, Diana did put it back on him. It's like, does she even know who you are? Like, you're lying about your identity. And they do belittle their relationship, saying how it was nice, but she didn't want to um have the facade of the secret identity. And it's like, that's a contradiction to Wonder Woman because she has the Diana Prince secret identity.
In this universe, mind you.
Yeah.
But also add on to it, that just sounded so much like Rebirth. Being with Cal was easy. But little
Yeah.
known fact, there was a plan, as we referenced previously, to get rid of the marriage because it limited the stories that you could tell about Superman, and Lois Lane sucks. I had to put that part in there. That's just me. And DiDio himself wanted to get rid of it, which makes me think I miss DiDio.
Yes. So to wrap up with the Death of Superman, yeah. So with that, it was just a distinction that Clark, again, it was post crisis to establish Clark is who I am, uh Superman is what I do. Diana only cares for the alien, the cow part that's supposedly bad, and and I can only be human Clark with Lois, and that's my true self, or something like that. Um, then you have here though in 2006 with Identity Crisis, or is it?
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's
and
Infinite Crisis.
Infinite Crisis. I keep wanting to say Identity
It's
Crisis.
one of the eyes. It's fine.
Yeah. Um, but that was on the top of the list to erase the marriage. And even with Mark Wade, Grant Morrison, they had the Superman 2000 pitch, which erased the marriage. And it was basically like um, Spider-Man One More Day. It was basically that. But Spider-Man, I think that was supposed to be before, yeah, Spider-Man, and that is what inspired that storyline.
Mhm.
But so if they got married, I believe it was 93. So um so that was about 7 years. Yeah, so it was 7 years of it. But I think still they wanted to get rid of it as soon as um the Lois and Clark show was canceled.
Mhm.
So I think that was 94, if I'm not mistaken. So you have 93 they got married, 94 or 95 or something like that. They wanted it canceled. Um, and once the marriage ended, then you had 2000 to try to get rid of the marriage. You had the beginning of the beginning of the 2000s where you do have Lena and Diana sort of like coming into play in a sense. You have but you also have during the 90s Kingdom Come too,
Mhm.
which kind of gave more weight to Superman and Wonder Woman. Um Going back actually, after the whole thing with Byrne messing up the setup with Superman and Wonder Woman, they basically didn't have a relationship, not even so much of a friendship either, of course, because, you know, it was awkward. And which is ironic because now they're basically doing the same thing with Rebirth, how Clark and Diana are like acquaintances, but they're not really friends. And now it seems like they're trying to slowly or piece by piece put it together of them being sort of best friends and acknowledging
I will
um
say, if Tom King can do that, I will take back everything I've ever said about Tom King.
you know what
If he
I
can. Now, let me be clear. This is Tom King we're talking about. But if somehow he can shock me, I'll be like, I was wrong about you, good sir.
you know what, honestly, if he can shock us, then it's kind of like, oh wow, I would shut up.
Then I will
But
buy anything you ever write.
honestly, I mean his deep dive, I don't know. Like what
Mm.
it's just so because he has his tendencies to mess up a good thing. And even though he did okay with Batcat, he still made it to where they were a little bit toxic. And it, and kind of twisted it a little bit. And then he did the 80th anniversary story where the first few pages were good. He had the dynamic a little bit, but the running joke of Clark being a cop and he was like a stiff. And then at the end, Clark asked Lois out on a date because he was desperate. I don't know. The one thing is that the art will be good because of March.
Yeah, that's the least we can always say about Tom King's books. He always gets the finest artist.
But other than that, with the dialogue, I have no confidence in it whatsoever. I just don't know when he says deep dive of friendship and hardships. I'm like, okay, what is that?
Oh no, yeah.
I'm like, okay,
We'll certainly see. But
I'm like, please have done your research or something like that.
You'll be doing more than a lot of writers in DC. I'm looking at you, Tomasi. So, speaking of doing research, it's time for a little goodness for post-crisis because it wasn't all bad. So there are two characters that benefited greatly from the post-crisis era, and that's Green Lantern and Batman. So, Britt, so how familiar are you with the good old GL?
So, I mean, the only thing that I really know is Hal Jordan, John Stewart, and the New 52, introduction of Jessica Cruz and Simon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is going to be really fun.
I do know some of the characters' names, but I don't really know their backstories. And honestly, though, with a little bit of figuring out post-crisis, looking at the Comic-Con charts a little bit, just to, get a little familiar with it, I can see, though, why Green Lantern and Batman did not get the hard reboot for New 52.
Because it was
and also the fact that, I mean, I don't think anybody refers to the movie, but the Green Lantern movie,
which was actually very underrated, and we're reviewing that on this coming week's movie night. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah, we're gonna do Green Lantern.
And also, I can see that, and what's the crazy thing is how Green Lantern, it is a multitude of characters to make up the franchise, but that not only did Batman overtake Superman as the top dog, but then you had Green Lantern also really during it, so with the post-crisis, with Superman and like treating it as the golden standard, as the truthful Superman, why was he basically fourth place? Because actually I think Flash even overtook Superman at some points.
I know. When you got these like characters that comic book fans know for sure, but non-comic book fans are like, what? But so the name that you have to know that will forever be synonymous with GL is Geoff Johns. Because, all right, I'm going to give you a little bit of so post-crisis. The thing about Green Lantern is that for the longest time, Hal was seen as a boring character. And this is what inspired this story, Emerald Twilight. So what happened in Emerald Twilight is that it's actually linked to the Return of Superman. So in the Return of Superman, Mongol and Cyborg Superman destroy Coast City, essentially his version of Metropolis. And Hal is like rightly messed up about it. So what happens is he uses his entire Green Lantern ring to recreate the city, people and all. And so the other lanterns show up on Earth and they're like, Hal, you're not allowed to do this. And he goes, yeah, screw you. He steals their rings for power to do it. And then he just goes nuts. He snaps. And then he flies to Oa, and Oa is like the capital of the Green Lanterns, and kills everyone.
Oh, wow.
He goes nuts and like slaughters everyone. And then what would happen is one of the Guardians, who are basically the heads of the Green Lanterns, escapes and gives a ring to Kyle Rayner, and that's how Kyle became a Green Lantern.
Oh, I actually do like Kyle.
Kyle's cool. The reason why they liked him is because, as opposed to like, yes, and the way they bring that in is like with Hal, whenever they did constructs, it was like boxing gloves and stuff. No, with Hal, he built mech suits. And actually, Kyle once said, "I'm just a manga nut with a power ring." It was just so good. Plus, this was all he had a good like dynamic with Wally West, who was the main Flash at the time, because this is post-crisis. So you had that. He was on Grant Morrison's JLA. Now, Parallax, and that was the name that Hal took over. That name is going to be very important later. He reemerged and actually had a heroic sacrifice during Final Night when the sun is about to like go out. Hal goes into the sun and uses all of his energy to reignite the sun as he's reciting the Green Lantern Oath. So it's kind of like there was a little bit of goodness in him. So Geoff Johns hops on the book. And the thing about Geoff Johns is that he likes to bring back things that he liked when he was reading, and that was Hal Jordan. But the problem is, Hal is a villain. How do I bring him back? So what Geoff did in Green Lantern Rebirth, he makes a huge retcon. So what he does is, I told you Parallax is important. So what happens is each of the Lantern Corps have an entity that actually personifies their thing. It's like the Green Lanterns have Ion the Whale. In fact, that's when Kyle became the character Ion, and he was basically like the example of the Green Lanterns, and he actually resurrected the Corps, and that's how the Green Lantern Corps came back to life. So they made it so a Parallax is just the yellow entity of fear, the embodiment of fear that was imprisoned in the central power battery. And the central power battery on Oa is where the Lanterns get their powers. This did two things. Number one, it explained why they had a weakness to the color yellow, because Parallax being yellow was a little bit of a corrupting influence on the ring. And then it also explained why Hal went evil, because when Coast City got taken out, he became fearful, and that was kind of a doorway for Parallax to possess Hal Jordan. That's why he was evil and became Parallax in Emerald Twilight. So it wasn't his like decision. So they bring Hal back, and it's this great moment when after Hal died, he became tied to the Spectre, and he was basically the Spectre for a long time. But then it's like even like a lot of like the locations that like are associated with Hal start like having these weird occurrences happen, to the point where Coast City is rebuilt like fully, and the League is like, okay, we got to check this out. So they find Hal visiting with Carol Ferris, because he still very much is in love with her. They weren't together at this point in the run. In fact, I think she was engaged to someone at this point, or maybe the modern run. The point is, Parallax reemerges and attacks. And he attacks by possessing like John and... Did you, Kyle? No, and Guy Gardner. And they're like having a battle with the League. At the same time, Kyle is fighting Sinestro, who is the leader of the Sinestro Corps, who trained Hal Jordan to be a Green Lantern, by the way. He was his training officer. And then what Sinestro did, the Corps found out that he was using his ring to be a dictator, and they sent Hal to take him out. And they imprisoned him in the central power battery. He got out. And this is kind of where you had him being like a Yellow Lantern, but not a Yellow Lantern. But what happened is, so Sinestro is fighting Kyle Rayner, and Kyle's getting his ass kicked. Then Ollie shows up with the arrows, and he's like, okay, get away from my friend. And he's like, you really think arrows are going to work? Ollie puts a Green Lantern ring on and like tries to will an arrow that like actually knocks Sinestro down for a bit, and giving Kyle and Oliver Queen a chance to escape. And Oliver goes, is that how it always feels whenever you conjure a construct? And the Kyle's like, every time. And then Ollie's like, damn, that's intense. So you already have this epic battle going on. Then they bring back Hal, and it's like Hal gets separated from the Spectre. And it's like the Green Lantern ring is like his guide back to the land of the living. He emerges and just bodies Sinestro, like wipes the floor with it. Because what you got to understand about Hal Jordan, while he's Earth's first Green Lantern, he was considered the lowest of the low. He grew to be the greatest of all of the Green Lanterns. Like, there is one person you don't screw with, it's Hal Jordan. Like, to the point where in the Rebirth Green Lantern books, which were fantastic, by the way, he's kidnapped by the Sinestro Corps, and one of the Yellow Lanterns calls up Sinestro. He goes, hey, we got a prisoner. Okay, who is it? And then he goes, Hal Jordan. And Sinestro's like, kill him now. He is about to destroy you. And then Hal does that, which is like, that's the sad part about Rebirth. The Green Lantern books were perfect. That was like the astounding thing that I didn't understand. So what they fight, and then there's this cool action scene. Parallax infects a Guardian and starts like taking out the entire Justice League. And then Hal Jordan is like, we got this, guys. And by the way, this is the first time the Justice League has seen Hal Jordan since he was a villain. So even they're like, what? And then what's kind of funny is, so you know the famous story of Batman punching Guy Gardner, right?
Yeah.
So there's this great moment where Batman goes, not yet, Hal Jordan. We have to talk. And then Hal Jordan just punches Batman. And then Guy Gardner's like, oh my gosh, I love you, Hal Jordan. Payback. They fly up. And then there's this awesome fight scene where they're fighting Parallax. And the cool part about this is where Ethan Van Sciver's art comes in, because the way Van Sciver draws is each lantern's constructs are unique. Like, John's an architect, so his stuff is more like precise and more like scaffolding. Guy Gardner is more like a flamethrower and a cannon because he's a hothead. Kyle Rayner, you can see like him like drawing out all these different details because he's an artist. And then they all start saying the Green Lantern Oath. And it is just so badass. They defeat Parallax. And then you may be wondering, what happens to Sinestro? So he goes to another universe called the Antimatter Universe, to a planet called Quard. And the Quardians build him a yellow ring. Now, what happens is, from Rebirth to what's called the Sinestro Corps War, at the end of all the Green Lantern issues, you would have like these rings showing up, these yellow rings saying blank. You have the ability to instill great fear. It even goes to Batman. And what's cool about it, since Batman had previously worn a Green Lantern ring, it rejects him. He's saying a presence of green energy detected. We must fly away. But yeah, it's just like that. But can you imagine that? So like, it's like remember, this is at a time when there was only the Green Lantern rings. So all of a sudden you're starting to see all these yellow rings showing up, and you're like, the hell is going on? And this is the theme throughout the Johns run. So the Sinestro Corps happens. So Sinestro wants to wipe out the Green Lanterns and take over as the police force. He recruits Cyborg Superman, the Anti-Monitor, and Superboy Prime to the Sinestro Corps. Yeah, he's stacked. Add on to that fact, they can kill, the Green Lanterns can't. So there was a part of the Sinestro Corps where like Hal and a bunch of the other lanterns like strategizing. All of a sudden, 80 Green Lantern rings just fly by going, user deceased must look for a new user. And there's this cool part where like they're getting wiped out, and the Guardians are like, let's rewrite. So basically, they have this thing called the Book of Oa, which is essentially their like rules of engagement. The Guardians start rewriting the rules, like now they can kill any member of the Sinestro Corps. So it's the point where the Green Lanterns are like, oh, hell yeah. So they start like wiping the floor with the Sinestros. And even the Sinestros are like, oh my gosh, I can kill now. Run. And they just take off running. So then, oh, by the way, there's also this really cool moment. So one of the members of the Sinestro Corps is the son of Abin Sur. Do you know who Abin Sur is?
I have no idea.
He was the one who crash landed on Earth and gave his ring to Hal. He was the previous greatest Green Lantern ever. So his son was like, I should have gotten my father's ring. Who is this human pretender? So they have a battle, and he gets killed later. But what also happens is that you have this group of lanterns called the Lost Lanterns, and these were the first people that Hal killed when he was parallaxed. It turns out they weren't killed. They were just captured by Cyborg Superman, and they're saved by Hal Jordan. They really don't trust him, obviously, but they're at this point, they're like, okay, you know what? You do your thing, we'll do our thing. We're not good, but we're not going to kill you. So there is this part where, and this is why the Sinestro Corps War is one of my favorite DC events ever. So there's this moment when, so for the longest time, Coast City had problems getting people to stay in the city because it got blown up. So everyone's like, what are the odds of this happening again? Slowly, people started to move back in, including Hal Jordan's brother and his family. So there's this part where the Sinestro Corps is coming for Coast City. And he says, Hal goes, you guys have to run. This is not safe. And they go, no, Hal, we're staying here. We got your back. And then Kyle goes, Hal, have you looked outside? They look outside, and the people of Coast City start putting green like tints on all their lights, showing solidarity to Hal. And it's like the entire town is standing with their Green Lantern. So they go out and they fight Sinestro and they win. So what you find out is, so the Sinestro invasion was happening globally, and a lot of the cities evacuated. Not one car left Coast City because they were standing with their superhero, to the point where Coast City had previously been known as Ghost City because no one lived there. It got renamed as Coast City, the city without fear.
Honestly, that is so cool because it's so much detail.
Yeah.
So much action. So much like character.
It's a war story.
And it's so good. Like just with the detail and describing it and everything, you do get like sucked into the story. And now it pretty much puts together of why Green Lantern overtook Superman, because now you have Metropolis. It's supposed to be the city of tomorrow, but it's pretty much the city of yesterday, because you have the Daily Planet, and it's so stagnant of, yes, it's a newspaper, but you rarely see them now. They're kind of using the computers and everything, but they are, with the Daily Planet, it just feels old, like you're still stuck in the 70s. And even the way Metropolis is sometimes drawn, it's drawn as like this just regular, I think it is inspired by New York, but it is just drawn like a regular city. It's not, it doesn't feel futuristic as it should be. And just the way how they've tried to have the family, the super family, protecting Metropolis or whatever. Like, first of all, you have all these Kryptonians in one city. Like, there shouldn't be any crime there.
Yeah, 5 Kryptonians. I'm not committing crime. But by the way, here's the page. So here's Hal's brother saying, no, I don't care what's coming. We're staying with you. And then here is everyone lighting green lights, to the point where the entire place is shining green lights and no one's leaving. Add on to the fact the Lanterns that didn't trust Hal were like, you know what? You stood with us. We're coming to stand with you. With Hal Jordan, the dude that previously killed them, this is the moment where I think Geoff Johns redeemed Hal Jordan. He did the impossible. He overcame character assassination and made Hal Jordan the guy he is today.
Yeah, because you see the turmoil or whatever that Hal went through, and he actually earned the redemption that he got. And it was built up with other characters like, okay, Batman and Gotham. Gotham is a character on its own because everyone basically is mentally unhinged.
Yep.
You know, it's a crazy city, and and even the regular people have a character. And so Gotham and Batman is married to each other. It's, you know, that's that. Green Lantern, with the fact that a city was destroyed, came back, you know, not trusting him. He turned into a villain. And then, like you said, Geoff Johns, he can write. He was, that is why he became, you know, the powerhouse he was within
and it's
DC.
because of this series. And even here, then there's the story of Coast City. You probably already heard it by now. When every other metropolis under threat was evacuating, there wasn't a single car, a single person that left Coast City. The city Green Lantern calls home stood with him and his corps. And what was once unjustly referred to as Ghost City by so many cynics has earned a new name, Coast City, the city without fear.
Yeah, that you can. Not only did Hal get his character development, but also the city itself.
Yeah.
And that is the way of how you get people to care for the supporting cast and the lesser known characters. Yes, Post Crisis did do that for Superman and Wonder Woman, but the thing is, with Superman's supporting cast, emphasizing on the human aspect is so mundane that it gets boring.
Yeah.
And there's nothing fantastical about it. It is nothing to really care for. As for his character is supposed to be on Paul Bunyan type level, and the way pre-crisis was, especially the Silver Age, where you did have Jimmy go through like really weird stuff, but now he's just like a stereotype of this photographer that's following Clark or Lois or whatever, trying to be a trio, and he's a third wheel, or, you know, he doesn't have just an interesting character. Lois is Lois, whatever. I really don't care for her character anyway. She even in post crisis, she was labeled as the super bitch because of her attitude and being so unlikable. She was also called the trophy wife because you have, it was very much like a like she was what, oh, not Ultraman, but Omni-Man. How he has, like, he came to Earth, he got a human wife to have the human experience, and his wife, he considered her as like a pet or something, to create this facade of being normal. Well, that's basically how some of the writers perceive Lois to be, as in she's just like this plot device, or this, you know, just to this plot device for Superman to have this facade of a normal life. So Yeah, and that is what it feels like, especially when they say that he could only be human with her, you know. And it's
Which I'm
like,
like, screw you. He was raised human, but
right.
that's the. And this is coming from people that are supposedly Superman's experts, and they discount the role that Jonathan and Martha Kent plays on it. But it's astounding. But anyway, I got to continue with this because this gets really good, and this is particularly relevant to a project you and I are working on. So,
Wonderful.
I'm gonna go back and do a little bit of going back. So, the Green Lanterns were not the Guardians' first attempt at policing the universe. They first made robots called Manhunters, and this is where like no man escapes the Manhunters comes from. The Manhunters went crazy in Sector 666. Yes, it's called that, and wiped out an entire planet, except for one man, Atrocitus. And his rage was so strong that he made a Red Lantern ring and power battery. And the thing about those, when the ring comes to you, it says blank, you have great rage in your heart. You belong to the Red Lanterns. And here's the thing about that ring. This is no ordinary ring that you can take on and off. When it gets on your finger, it replaces your heart, and all of your blood is replaced with like acidic plasma that you can then like excrete, like these guys are, like these Red Lanterns are doing right now. And it like burns you. So it's very much like more of like fire and bloodshed. So what happens is that one of the Green Lanterns kills a Sinestro Corps member who had surrendered. They put her on trial. And that's Lyra, and that's her right here. And it's also one of the a picture I sent you a little while back. So she gets disbarred from the Green Lanterns. And what happens is all of a sudden a red ring shows up. You have great rage in your heart. You belong to the Red Lanterns. And what happens is that Hal goes to Rhea, the headquarters of the Red Lanterns. He meets Atrocitus and all these other beings, and he's like, the hell is going on here? And then he finds out there's also a Blue Lantern Corps formed by two of the Guardians who left. And what happens with that is that the Blue Lanterns are the only ones that can like purge the influence of the Red Ring from someone. Essentially, they can like restart your heart, because the thing that'll happen in Blackest Night is a character will get a red ring, and then they'll feel great love, and then the ring will come off, and then they'll practically die. I'll get to that in a second. So it happens to Hal, where he gets a red ring put on him because Sinestro kills Lyra, and then he gets the red ring. The Blue Lanterns show up and purge him of the influence and other stuff, and then like a battle ensues. Now, what's important for this is that this is all leading to a massive story that Geoff was building toward since Green Lantern Rebirth. And this is one of those things where when I was reading, because I have all three omnibuy, when I was reading through all of those, you start to see, okay, that's where he hinted this, that's where he hinted this. It's like he's telling one massive story instead of like many arcs, which is the problem with a lot of like, even like in modern Superman, where they're focused on the arcs. But what happens is then these Star Sapphires show up. Now, the cool thing about the Star Sapphires, they're linked to Hawkman and Hawkgirl.
Really?
What happened was, in one of their past lives, Hawkman and Hawkgirl crash landed on a planet, and they were going to die, and their love was so strong that they created the pink energy of love. And it was brought, and the founders of the Corps were Guardians who left the main group of Guardians. Because what happens is the Guardians decided that to properly police the universe, they have to purge themselves of emotion, and that's why when you typically see depictions of the Guardians, they're very like robotic. That's why. So a group of Guardians left, and he goes, "Wait, what? This is crazy. Why are we doing this?" They leave, and then they form these Star Sapphires, which are only women. And this is where Carol Ferris comes in, because the ring it feeds on great love. And it turns out, even when she's not with Hal, she feels great love for Hal Jordan, even though he annoys the hell out of her. And it's really honestly on par with SuperWonder in terms of great ships, because actually they grew up together as kids. Her father runs the company that Hal's father worked for as a test pilot, and then Hal went in his stead. And what happened with that is his father was on a plane, was test flying a plane, and the plane blew up, and the father died. And then, for some reason, Carol's father just vanished from all public knowledge. And all of a sudden, Carol was running the company. So Hal gets really pissed off one day, and he goes, "Okay, you know what? Screw this. Where is this guy? He won't even show me any dignity of actually talking to me." So he shows up at the dude's house, storms upstairs. The dude's on life support because when Hal's father died, Carol's father felt such guilt that his health declined. He told me, "You know what, Hal? He's always considered you a son." And they have this great moment where Carol and Hal are on the porch, and then it's at one point Carol goes, "You never get used to it, do you?" And then Hal goes, "What?" And then Carol goes, "Being alone." And then Hal hugs her and goes, "You're not alone, Carol." And it's kind of super wondery if you think of Justice League 12 and the conversation that Supes and Wendy have.
Right. That's the thing, is that these couples, I did not know. I knew of Hawkman and Hawk Girl, their reincarnations and how their love is basically eternal. But I did not know that it was powerful enough, to create for a total different, franchise. And again, you have these couples that have such interesting backgrounds and just so much more story, but the writers just
they don't take risks. That's the issue. And actually, what's kind of cool, if you want a good comic to read, Green Lantern right now by Jeremy Adams is good, because you have Hal comes back to Earth, and Earth is quarantined for some reason. We don't know yet. They're building to that. And Hal has to figure this out. And Carol is engaged to someone else, but he's trying to win her back. So you have that relationship stuff, but also pure superheroes. So that's one of the few books. Green Lantern has always been one of the few books, except when Grant Morrison was on it, where it was so good. This is DC's Star Wars.
Yeah, that exactly. It's so galactical and all of that, but it has so much heart in it, and just with every detail, it makes me want to read it. And it just makes me understand more of why, of course, Batman is going to be number one, because, well, honestly, I don't know why, because unless it's just a self-insertion of you thinking as a teenage boy,
I could be Batman. Because here's the thing, Britt. Batman's a career option.
Honestly, I mean, he's really not, because he's inherited, he has an inheritance from his parents, that died, murdered. He is emotionally stunted, kind of mentally unhinged himself. He's alone. He doesn't have the capability to really love, and you have to basically accept that dysfunction. You have to love that dysfunction that he has, and that is why him and Selena or Talia or any other of his love interests that are kind of crazy can be together. But yeah, that's Batman's background is very much a teenage boy's fantasy, more than being relatable as a character. And and that is why his character is so popular, because it does go into all comics are power fantasies, very much so, because you don't see anyone flying around, whether they have underwear on the outside or not. You don't see anyone actually going out in a bat suit or, acting like they're some type of night
Actually,
ninja.
you do kind of see that because there are real life superheroes who patrol and beat people up.
Well, you see that, but at the same time, they are actually risking themselves. You don't have them, fighting monsters and stuff.
Oh
So,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
that's what I'm saying. You don't have them doing that. You have them fighting, real people with, just the same amount. If it's a gun, it's a gun. Unless it is true about Area 51 and it is something going on the outside world, unless it's something like that. But other than that, we are in a reality where Batman is very much a very unrealistic power fantasy, and you don't have a billionaire going around in a bat suit. You don't. If someone did go around in a bat suit, they would lock you up and put you in a straitjacket.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Arguably, it's weird they haven't done that with Batman yet.
Well, but so with the Green Lantern, though, that makes me want to read the entirety of more of the characters.
You gotta.
As you said, they are like specifically designed for the occupation or personality that they have. Although they are all Green Lanterns, or whatever corp they are in, they still have a distinctive character. So you can tell the difference between Kyle Rayner. You can tell the difference between John Stewart and Hal Jordan and Jessica and Simon. You can tell, or Kilgore. You can tell the difference, not only appearance-wise, but just personality-wise. With the super family,
for the most part, except for Clark. Wait. Here's the thing. Even with Clark, because John is basically discount Clark at this point.
Exactly. And they were very redundant. They didn't have much of a personality. They were all the same because their powers are the same, but they don't have a distinctive. Even with the whole jackets thing, they still seem redundant.
Because they are, and it's just, again, 5 Kryptonians in one city. Why does anyone do anything? But one thing I forgot to mention: there's an Orange Lantern Corps.
I have seen that.
So that's greed, and the reason why the Larfleeze the orange is the only Orange Lanterns because he won't share the power with anyone, and he's so powerful because he's not sharing the power. But there was this storyline, I think this is after Blackest Night, and we're getting to that in a second, where he found out the concept of Santa Claus, and he makes a list of things he wants, but Santa doesn't come, so he resolves to go to the North Pole to kill Santa Claus.
Oh my God.
It was so good.
That is so childish.
It's so childish, yes, because remember, he's like super greedy. But moving on, then we get to Blackest Night. Now, what's cool about this is kind of inspired by an Alan Moore idea, because Alan Moore had this Green Lantern pitch where it was going to be like this. It was going to be kind of like this. He has an idea for the prophecy of Blackest Night, and that's the through line throughout this entire run. That what would happen is that there would be like all these cores would rise up, and then there would be a war of light among all these cores, and then the Blackest Night would happen. No one knew what that was. So then we have this character named William Hand, and he's like a D-list Green Lantern villain who was obsessed with death. What happened is that one day he killed himself because he was so obsessed with death. Then a black ring of death comes on his finger and resurrects him as a zombie. It turns out the Black Lantern entity is called Necron. And what he does is first off, he turns the anti-monitor into the power battery for the Black Lanterns. And then he unleashes what essentially is a zombie apocalypse in the DC universe. everyone that was dead rises back as a zombie. Now, the cool thing about this is that they weren't like your traditional zombies. They could still speak and stuff. It's like Maxwell Lord went to Wonder Woman. Remember when you snapped my neck? Thanks a lot for that. And it was really, really cool the way they did this. So Hal is going around. Hal rallies like all the leaders of the Corps: Sinestro, Atrocitus, Carol, Larfleeze, and they all like rally up. So there's this moment. Well, and Barry, this is also when you get that forced Wonder Bat moment by Rucka, where Wonder Woman becomes a Black Lantern. This is where that's from. And the way Necron does this is he takes over like Superman and everyone else, because he said, hey, you died. You only came back because I opened the door. So really, I allowed you to die so I can actually kill you again. So the ring, it gets on like every Justice Leaguer who has died. And it almost gets on Hal and Barry. It's just what Barry does is Hal latches onto him with the ring, and Barry runs them into the future, into like a couple of seconds into the future, and the rings and the Black Lantern rings lose their connection. So what happens is, all right, they need reinforcements, right? And one of the Guardians, Ganthet, who's always been on Hal Jordan's side, he's been like Hal's cheerleader. He goes, okay, so I have the ability to deputize other people as lanterns. And since all the other cores are based on Owen technology, I can do the same thing. So all these rings go out. And this is where you get Wonder Woman becomes a Star Sapphire. Lex Luthor becomes an Orange Lantern. Scarecrow becomes the Yellow Lantern of Fear. Hal obviously stays green. And Barry becomes a Blue Lantern. And for some reason, the Atom becomes there was a Purple Lantern Corps called the Indigo Tribe. And they're basically the Corps of Compassion. So what happens is this new thing, all these different superheroes rise up and fight in Necron, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So what they do is they discover the White Lantern entity of life. And what Hal Jordan says is, yeah, Necron, you may have opened the door, but we ultimately chose to live. We chose to step through. So if there's anyone that's a White Lantern Corps, it's us. And every single group, everyone that has died and come back to life comes up. You have like Donna Troy, Wonder Woman, everyone shows back up. And what they do, since Necron needed a tether, and that tether was William Hand, they resurrect William Hand, and thus severing a Necron's link to the world. Then they resurrect the Anti-Monitor, thus purging Necron of his power, and then banish him. But what would happen is, then the White Lanterns bring back to life a lot of characters that had died, like Arthur Curry, Aquaman, Firestorm, Hawkman and Hawkgirl during Blackest Night. Maxwell Lord comes back to life. Basically, what DC used Blackest Night as is an excuse to bring back characters that they wanted to bring back and to kill characters that they wanted to kill. So that's how Arthur Curry comes back to life. And what happens is, one of the deputized lanterns was Mira, who became a Red Lantern because she's an angry person. She sees Arthur, and then all of a sudden the red ring says rage compromised, slides off her finger. Then she basically goes into cardiac arrest, because if you take off the ring, it stops your heart because it essentially replaces your heart. So what actually happens that's really cool is Carol uses the love between Arthur and Mira to bring her back to life, with some help of the Blue Lanterns, but literally uses the love between Arthur Curry and Mira. That's what brings her back to life.
Wow.
So it's kind of like this certain project that Britt and I are working on.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's how Blackest Night ends, and that's kind of where I leave the Green Lanterns, because that's like the relevant thing. And then it goes into like Brightest Day, which basically deals with them which basically deals with them searching for the different Lantern entities. But the point is, then we get into the New 52, and there's this great moment in the New 52 that I wanted to bring up, even though it's past post-crisis. There's actually two moments. So the end of the Geoff Johns run. Well, first off, there's this so Sinestro and Hal are taken captive, and Hal has the ring charge for one final construct, and he knows he's probably gonna die. So he's like, "What's the last thing I want to see?" And it's a construct of Carol. And he's like, "That's the last thing I want to see." And he tells us to Carol, and he goes, "Listen, you were the last thing I want to see. I've always loved you. Give me another shot. I know it probably won't work, but you know what? You're worth it." And then, it's kind of funny. He goes, "Give me a second chance." And then Carol goes, "Technically, this would be your 10th chance, but okay." So they get back together. Then at the end of the run, it cuts hundreds of years in the future to a new class of Green Lanterns that are taking the oath. And then they go to the keeper of the historian of the lanterns. They go, "Tell us a story about Hal Jordan." So they tell him the entire story. And then the end of the story is basically Hal goes on this life and death adventure. Then they show the end of the Green Lanterns. They show Jessica Cruz. They show Simon Baz. Then they show Hal Jordan marrying Carol Ferris, and their rings for the wedding are their lantern rings. So there's that. And then they have a son named Martin, and you see like New 52 Soups and Wonder Woman and Batman there, because again, it's in the New 52. They didn't reboot. And then Geoff Johns does something that to this day gives me chills. They basically say, here's how important Hal Jordan is. Everything that happened this entire run, this entire story, is because Hal got the ring. That started a chain reaction of dominoes that led to everything. All these other cores, they basically say his was the light that ignited an entire fire of a universe. Literally, they go back to Geoff goes to the very beginning of the Green Lantern story. Everything that's happened is because of Hal Jordan.
And that really, really is a full circle, with how, because it's creating a big boom of something, and it progressed into something with, again, going back to Superman. He's supposed to be like the first hero of the genre, sure. And how they say, if it wasn't for Superman, you wouldn't have Batman, you wouldn't have Green Lantern, or stuff like that. But it's like, okay, but in story, Superman is really in regression mode. Like,
he kind of is, yeah.
He isn't progressing and isn't putting stuff out there. Even with his post-crisis reboot in the I guess it was the Bronze Age or the Silver Age, one of them, but he wasn't a part of the Legion anymore. And with the Legion now, it just feels like it's supposed to be 1,000 years into the future, inspired by Superman, and it's like, but honestly, I don't even see the Legion as inspirational or interesting or creative as how you describe the Lanterns.
Oh yeah, and remember, this is all practically just stuff Geoff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver made up on the fly, and it's like they took a character that the reason why we still talk about Hal Jordan is because of this run right here, and the epic run it was. Because oh my god, there's a point. I've read the entire run. I cried multiple times throughout that entire run because the love and attention that's given to this character, the way he successfully redeemed him, the way he overcomes everyone doubting him, the way he fights for the woman he loves and his core, and the way that he exemplifies a Green Lantern, because a Green Lantern is supposed to exemplify the will to overcome fear. And oh my gosh, does he do that? And that's why he works with Carol Ferris, because when you think about it, her powers, her ring is powered by love. His is powered by willpower. And you need willpower to fight for love.
Yeah, they very much match perfectly together. As of what they stand for. And how I have a different perspective of his character. At first I thought he was shallow, womanizer and everything. But yeah, just this whole, talk about the lanterns and the story behind it. I know that honestly, I think that post crisis was, and it benefited his character because I believe in pre crisis his character was a shallow
He was
womanizer and
boring. Yeah, and to be clear, he did have another love interest in this line that lasted like a couple of issues. It was a fellow test pilot, but really it was Carol the entire time. He basically said it's always just been you.
yeah, and that's the thing. Those are the relationships that honestly make sense to last and to be the, only one when it actually fit to be like like Hawkman, Hawk Girl, or if you want to call it Hawk Woman.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, the reincarnated lovers type going through uh life and death and all of that, recreating worlds is seem that they um or creating stuff that works. Um
Well, not only that, Hawkgirl and Hawkman have a great moment in Blackest Night. They come back to life, and Hawkgirl, the way the status quo was, Hawkman remembered everything. Hawkgirl did not, but but when they're brought back by the White Lantern rings, she goes, "I remember everything. I remember our past lives, but most of all, I remember you, and I have missed you so much, Carter."
and what's funny is that I don't think that there was ever even a follow-up on what Rucka did with Wonder Woman.
Oh, you mean on the
Like,
Batman? No, it just happens. I'm like, what? Because remember,
so
actually, here's how this links to Batman real quick. Because Batman had died at this point, because this is after Final
exactly.
Crisis. Here's the funny thing. This is when they started to think Batman's not really dead. Because so the Batman skeleton comes up from the ground, but it's like not like it's not like sentient, because I explained that like when the zombies came back, they had some personality. This one didn't. Then when Necron's defeated, it just crumbled. Because what had happened, when you find out in Final Crisis, is he wasn't killed. He was sent back in time, and the corpse that Superman was holding, that was a clone that Darkseid was trying to make so he could take out the Justice League from within.
Oh wow.
That's where the skeleton of the skeleton that Superman's holding comes from. And then you find out because Tim Drake always knew, okay, Batman's not dead. There's something fishy going on. This is when everyone else was like, okay, yeah, maybe something's messing up, because this doesn't make sense. And at this point, by the way, and we'll talk about this in Batman, Dick Grayson was Batman at this point, and even he had a moment where he has to fight Black Lantern versions of his mom and dad.
Oh, that would be
like
traumatizing.
A lot of the tie-ins of this were fantastic, because you see like them having to fight. Cassie Sandsmark had to fight Superboy, because remember, they were together, speaking of SuperWonder, previous to this, and she actually again brought him back to life because of their relationship. A lot of this is saved by relationships. That's hilarious. And the Superboy Prime one was hilarious, because you cut to him and he's reading the comic book issue that you're reading right now, Blackest Night, because the joke about Superboy Prime is he's from a universe where DC is comics and there were no other superheroes on his Earth. So, but he got powers because of Haley's comet. So what happens is the Black Lantern version of Earth 3 Lex Luthor, Alexander Luthor, who was a sort of good guy, bad guy from Crisis on Infinite Earths, shows up, powers him up, points him in the direction of like the people that ruined his life. Superboy Prime flies to DC Comics headquarters in New York, into Dan DiDio's office, going, "You guys have ruined my life."
Oh,
it was so good. It was so meta. But anyway,
yeah,
as you were saying,
yeah, it's the fact that the aftermath, whatever, of this, or the whole point is relationships, and
Mhm.
for Diana to be about love. Her love is for life. Her love
Yeah.
is for the world. Her love is for her mother and sisters, and to out of nowhere try to place her love on Batman when she had no prior, like, no relationship with him at all, no
Yeah.
romantic relationship.
It
And
didn't
at the
make
same
sense.
time, yeah, at the same time, she was with Tom Treasure, right? In her
I
own book.
think so. But
And
there's a moment in this when Wonder Woman was the Black Lantern previous to gain the Star Sapphire ring, and the rings are dueling for control. And then Carol goes, the rings are fighting control, but there's no one that loves the world more than Diana. And then the ring takes, and then the love ring takes over.
okay, so if it was already there that says her love is for the world, like, that was self-explanatory, of course, because that's who Wonder Woman is. So I remember when someone explained that when the backlash, and yeah, if that story were to come out like now, the backlash on the internet would be so much worse. But I guess they had fan mail or something like that
Mm-hmm.
at the time, but it was a lot of backlash, or maybe on the message boards, um, that was received for that tie-in, and Rucka pretty much, they were doing the blame game, and he
Mm,
wanted to blame editorial to say that they made him do it. And
sure
it's
they did.
like, yeah,
Sure
and
they
it's like,
did.
sure, because afterwards you have actually um made yourself known to want to try to put them together. Even in Rebirth and having a interview, he said that he wanted them to have like this romance or whatever, because it was like this twisted Diana rebelling against Hippolyta.
Oh, it's
And
twisted, all right. It's twisted.
yeah, and for Batman to have like this jealousy of, and but he this twisted jealousy of Diana's like her carefree spirit or whatever. And it's like that does not equate to a romance at all. Have no idea what you're thinking, but this is not romance. And also, I believe Nicola Scott,
Mhm.
um, she basically, like, in a sense, romanticized Diana turning into like a nurse. And I think she did
Yeah.
say that, like, Diana can nurse him, and like,
I'm like, they're not going to let, first off, they're never going to let you change Batman. This is what I always tell Wonder Bat people when they tell me that. I'm like, they're never going to change Batman because Batman's their cash cow. And that ain't happening anytime soon. And
right.
so I don't get, what's the point then?
Yeah, that was totally out of nowhere, when, and even with Batman being dead and not having any type of prior um like relationship, whatever, with Diana. They're with two different people. I mean, she's with Tom Treasure trying to have a baby or whatever.
Actually,
Um,
they had broken up at this point because Tom broke up with her. He's like, because at one point he's like, I don't think we're compatible or anything like that. And Wonder Woman has this
well, of
like
course they're
girl,
not.
what? You know, of course
I,
they're not. And then it's kind of funny is that Wonder Woman tells this whole story to Giganta of all people, and Giganta's like giving her relationship advice. It's kind of
oh,
odd, but I'm like, at least you're not with Tom Tresser, who I can't stand. But there was that. So
so even
transitioning,
with that,
I should get, yeah, go ahead.
yes, okay. So even if she's not with him, it's still the fact that Diana isn't romantically linked to anyone. But
Certainly not
in
to
regards
Batman.
to, yeah, in regards to Batman, it's the fact that, first of all, he's dead, or
Dead.
presumed to be dead, and then he goes to Selena. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Diana, the thing is with the Wonder Bat whole thing, first of all, Batman is never really in the Wonder Woman comics. Like,
Mm-mm.
when when they try to do it, it's so awkward and it doesn't fit. Like when Rucka tries to, it's
With the
it's
Hikateo story, which, by the way, what's
yeah,
hilarious about that one, Wonder Woman's drinking out of a Superman mug.
yeah, and it's basically showing how they are very antagonistic and
Yeah.
they're not compatible. They don't get along at all.
I'm like,
Even when
thank you, George. Thank you, Greg, for showing me why Wonder Bat doesn't work.
yeah, you're trying to make them into a couple, but you're making it worse that they're not. And even with his when he did Superman for Bendis when he revealed his identity
Oh
and
god.
he made the story about Batman and Wonder Woman was following him around like this like latched on flirtatious puppy or whatever. She and it was about Batman, not about Clark's identity. Even uh Diana, you didn't get her perspective on having the identity revealed or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, of course, Rucka would, um, he would write something like that. Um, Also, again, with the whole, well, people presume that Clark and Diana are together, but no, we're just friends or something like that. Yeah, sure, they were just friends, but you can't deny that it had to be something there. But you want to try to, again, twist the whole thing of making somehow Bruce and Diana best friends, with which they're
They're
not.
not.
And
They're
then,
clearly not. But by the way, if you want to see where that comes from, check out our episode on the Trinity. Continue on.
yeah, and then you have it where Wonder Woman is she's never in a Batman comic. Like,
Yeah, no, because here's the thing. It's the same thing like Steve Trevor in a Wonder Woman comic. It, Babin doesn't fit in her world.
yeah. And they this is why they don't have Nightwing with Starfire,
Yeah.
even though because they want the aesthetic of the Bat family. And basically no supers are pretty much allowed. Even with Superman, it's kind of like they are it's like the world finest thing is even with that they have it to where they're not really in Gotham. Like Superman doesn't deal with stuff in Gotham. Even
Mm-hmm.
if he is around, he doesn't do anything. He's basically turned into a flying brick or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So and you're not trying to do a romance anyway, so that wouldn't work. Um so it's okay to have Clark, sometimes in Batman's comics, but he's really not. It's always Batman in Superman comics, and he's the smart one and everything like that. But yeah, it's no balance there whatsoever. So if Clark is rarely in Batman comics, what makes you think Diana is in Batman comics? Which
Well,
she's not.
I
And there's just
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just saying, and there's no dynamic there. So for Rucka or anyone to try to shoot force this dynamic, it was never there.
It didn't work, and it was jarring as hell when I read the tie-in. But speaking of Batman, so we're going to transition to our next character. By the way, Britt, as a quick check-in, so what do you think of Green Lantern?
I want to read more.
Read
And
the Geoff
honestly,
Johns. Read anything that has Geoff Johns' name on it. And the cool thing about the run, if you start a Green Lantern Rebirth, you don't have to read anything previous because Geoff Johns explains everything very clearly as he references it. So it's not like you have to go back and read like 80 years of Green Lantern. You can, but it's not required to fully appreciate this entire run.
and that is a good thing because, again, this is why Green Lantern was not rebooted in New
Yeah.
52 because it, like what they're trying to do now of everything matters,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, because they more so enhanced and yeah, they did retool and kind of change some things, but at the same time they still started a brand new world with Green Lantern to where yeah, you don't necessarily have to go back to older comics or anything like that. You can appreciate the new. But with Superman, with Wonder Woman, they are so like faulty in a way, and like the drastic difference of trying to put them in a new era and how stagnant they are at the same time is like you have no way of finding a good point to, care for the characters. It has to, for them, it has to be single stories, and mostly Elseworlds or these one, storylines that has like limited issues to actually grasp at least somewhat of Superman and Wonder Woman as characters. But with Green Lantern, with Batman, you can pick up any book or any storyline, with them, it seems like, and you can understand and invest in their characters.
Depends on the writer, but yeah, I really due to Geoff Johns because he has some deep cuts throughout the run, like with Parallax, like with Emerald Twilight. But he's like, okay, so here's in a nutshell how went evil, and then he became Parallax. And now that you know why it's relevant to what I'm doing, here's what I'm gonna do. So the next character that it helps, and I couldn't figure out a better way to transition than do this. So Batman. So he's the other character that really benefited from post-crisis, because this is where you have like Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, Frank Miller, Dark Knight Returns, most of the fantastic stories that you would think of when you think of Batman come from post-crisis. Because remember, pre-crisis Batman was a joke of a character, like completely a joke. Yeah, especially with it was like Adam West, or like they basically had Batman like give tours to the public of the Batcave. And I'm like, as a like more modern Batman fan, I'm like, there's no way he would do that. But all right,
right.
So
and,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, and basically with turning Batman into a more darker character for that time of the 80s of, and getting to now you have Batman movies with Keaton. That really skyrocketed Batman's popularity even more so. So yeah, post-crisis really helped. Not only did Superman's popularity naturally or whatever was waning itself, but also Batman, they found like a new way to get the character to have gain fans.
Mm-hmm. So you have the story Batman Nightfall. Now what's cool about this one, this is where Bane comes from. And what Bane does, so he was he was born in a prison, and the way the laws worked in this country, he had to serve out the term of his father. So and naturally what happened is that he grew up in the prison, and then he starts hearing on the news about this Batman like character. So he's like, okay, I'm gonna go take him out. He will be my white whale, essentially. So he escapes from prison. What he does to mess with Batman is he breaks all of the villains out of Arkham Asylum, and then waits, because Batman is tiring himself out searching and apprehending all these villains. So when he finally shows up and fights Batman, he's weak, and then he breaks Batman's back. This is where the breaking of the back happens. So Batman's out of commission. The reason why this happened is because you had fans going, I want Batman to kill people and be more like edgy, because this was during the Image times. So you had this guy named John Paul Valley, and he basically took over the mantle of Batman. But the thing is, he started getting more brutal. He started adding more armor to the suit, and that's where you get the Nightfall armored Batman. It's kind of funny. This is the Batman that would like be around during the reign of the Superman and the return of Superman. It's kind of funny. Clark's talking to this one, but doesn't know it's not Bruce, which I'm like, that's kind of weird, but I'll go with it. So you get that. Then eventually Batman rises up, and then has to reclaim the mantle from Azrael, and obviously he does so, and then he has to fight and defeat Bane. So he does that. Then you get like Dark Knight Returns, which I know it's not like in canon, but it's in this era that the book came out, and that and the Keaton movies solidified the dark Batman in the public consciousness. Because according to even the DC documentary, Dark Knight Returns was like on the Rolling Stones. It wasn't just like some comic book that came out. No, that was like heavily like beloved. Then you get obviously the Keaton movies. Then you get Batman Hush, which the thing about Batman Hush is that's like one of the best ways to, in a single book, read all of Batman's history. Because the thing about it is that it references so much. The death of Jason Todd. Every member of the Bat family makes a cameo. Superman even makes a cameo. Every villain makes a cameo.
Possessed.
And they're all, possessed. And they're all drawn by Jim Lee. So that's just adds on to it. Plus, this is the post-crisis where a story, I believe, when Batman and Catwoman first like kiss, and you get that iconic image of them kissing. They're like the cape is wrapping around them, and you see like the city in the moonlight. There, yeah, go ahead.
Right. I was gonna say, I think that first going back to Frank Miller. Frank Miller, I think he did Batman Year One.
Yes, he did. Yes.
For the post-crisis or for that. So not only did he do Year One, but he also did Dark Knight Returns. Then you have Keaton. Then you have Nightfall and Hush. And yes, Hush was basically the solidification of Batman and Catwoman's, of course they are going to do their rooftop chasing and stuff like that, and bat and mouse, bat and cat.
It works.
Yeah, cat and mouse chase thing. But this is what solidified Selina as like his number one.
Well, also, this is where he reveals his identity to her because at one point, so Thomas Elliot, Batman's childhood friend, who later turns out to be Hush, is killed, air quotes, and Batman goes and sees Catwoman, and he's like, I recently lost a friend, and it's been said by people close to me that the reason why I'm taking it so good is because I have you in my life, and I guess it's time I like fully trust you. And then Catwoman goes, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure." He takes off the mask because the funny thing is that Catwoman was dating Bruce Wayne at the time and didn't know he was Batman. And there's this conversation they have where like she's like, "I'm seeing this other guy," and the Batman's like, Batman just smiles and he's like, "Oh, a mystery man, you say?" She didn't know she was dating the same guy.
Well, I mean, at least with them, it's kind of like they have on masks, and you can't really, like, again, with the chase and everything like that, they're not really all touchy, I don't think. So yeah, the whole disguise thing works for Batman and Catwoman, but he is able to tell her his truth and want to reveal his identity. It's definitely not like Superman and the whole, all I need to do is just take off my glasses and
it was a big deal when he reveals his identity to someone. That is the ultimate form of trust for Bruce.
Exactly. And also, the only thing that I don't like with that is, and they've reconciled that, and Morrison kind of apologized, but not really.
I'm getting to that. I know what you're getting to, but I promise I'm getting to Damian Wayne.
Yeah, Talia's character.
That's my issue with that too, because that's like, but
I mean, her character is very well.
It's kind of complicated.
I think Yeah, and the thing is, I think it was first introduced how they were married.
Hmm.
Um
That was in
and they
Elseworlds where they got married, I think.
I think Son of a Demon was
Yeah,
in continuity.
that
Um
that was, I believe, yeah.
for
I
yeah, and
think.
for them to be married, I think they were. And but to retcon that or whatever and to turn and to do that to Talia's character and
Yeah, to turn it into I drugged you so I can have a kid. That's
yeah, to also just change her whole character into like this cold-hearted, like harpy and um even with having Damien, she wasn't very motherly like how she was, you know, before. And
Mhm.
and for so many writers, especially how Tom King did for the whole marriage thing for Selena in Rebirth, it was like you keep this storyline just to put Talia's character down, but she isn't like that. Like that was not the purpose of her character. Her character was to go against her father. She knowing that they were assassins and everything like that, and she was
Mhm.
caught in between. But she really cared about Bruce. She wanted to be good. She wanted to be his wife. She wanted to be the mother of his child in a very, mutual, positive way. But you turned her into, and yes, she was a femme fatale type villainess in a sense, but she was still good,
Mhm.
in her own way. So yeah, to turn her into that, and for some writers to use that to prop up Selena, that's my only issue.
Mhm.
But it seems that Ram V that is doing Detective
Oh,
Comics right
it's so
currently.
good.
Yeah.
So good.
And the fact that he has the latest issue, Talia and Selena are teaming up and they are mutual respect and how they can both of them care for Bruce, and Talia can call him beloved and be loving towards him, and Selena has no problem with it. That is basically the most mature writing that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it
Honestly,
is.
ever. Because any other time with, you know, love
The girls
interest or
would be
whatever,
having like a
like
fight over
cat
Bruce.
fights.
Yeah, pun
Yeah,
intended. But it's like,
right.
nah, they're mature enough that this wouldn't actually happen. Because
Yeah,
I
so,
get the feeling even Talia knows. Yeah, so because even during Tom King's run, they had like a sword fight, and even Talia's like, yeah, you're the one for Bruce.
yeah, but even with that, it was like Selena, it was just like how Selena was able to, even though they were possessed, it was still that she kicked or whatever the flashes. That
Hmm.
was jumping the shark.
Hmm.
So with winning a sword fight with Talia
Against Talia, that's the only part where I
against
draw like BS on.
yeah, because Selena is not she's not trained in swords. Yeah, she's acrobatic or acting like a cat or whatever like that, can flip around, but she is not she does not use weapons, and she used the whip, sure, but swords, no. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that that's my pet peeve with writers when trying to prop up other love interests. I
Exactly.
just can't do
So
that.
then by there's one more story I wanted to bring up is the Long Halloween, which basically there's this killer that's basically killing a lot of these mob people throughout all these different holidays. They call it the holiday killer because he strikes on every holiday. Now there is a strong Bruce and Selena like subplot of this that I wanted to mention, but the big point of Long Halloween is it's the origin for Two-Face, where he's like a district attorney that's trying to take out the mob, and then it's basically implied that he's the holiday killer, and then they like spurt acid on half his face, and then he turns into Two-Face. So
Wow.
then we get to all right. So How familiar are you with the history of Jason Todd?
All I know is that he was the second Robin,
Mm-hmm.
and he Joker beat the crap out of him.
All right. So what happened was, yes, he was the second Robin, but the fans hated him. So they did the story called Death in the Family, where they made it seem like Joker was going to kill Jason Todd. But then they had a campaign for the fans to vote on whether or not he lives or dies, and someone gamed
Oh
it.
yeah.
Yes, so someone gamed it so Jason Todd dies. So he was dead. And then this is where you would get like, but the story is actually pretty heartbreaking because Jason was trying to track down his biological mom, and he does it, and she's in league with the Joker. So it's extremely extremely heartbreaking story. So he dies, and then Batman starts becoming more brutal and more withdrawn, and then this kid named Tim Drake shows up, and he deduces who Batman and Robin are because he remembers watching. He was a big fan of the Flying Graysons, the circus act that that Nightwing was in back before he was Robin. So he's watching the TV one day, and he sees Robin pull up this really complicated aerial maneuver that only Dick Grayson knew how to do. So he's like, okay, so he's Dick Grayson. That means Bruce Wayne is Batman. So he deduces who they are, and he shows up to Titan's Tower and basically goes, Nightwing, Batman needs a Robin. Can you come back and be Robin again? He goes, no, I'm good being Nightwing. You can be Robin though. So they essentially make Batman readopt him as Robin, and then Batman, in an attempt to make sure that no other Robin dies, he puts him through the ringer in terms of training. He brings in Lady Shiva. He brings in so many different people to try and make sure that he doesn't die again. So what happens is then so Jason Todd became one of the three characters that can never come back to life, and that was Jason Todd, Bucky Barnes, and Uncle Ben from Spider-Man. All three of them, by the way, will have come back at some point. But what's kind of funny is that, and by this happened around the time of the Winter Soldier storyline where Bucky came back to life. So we get the storyline called Under the Red Hood. So what happens is this criminal called the Red Hood is like killing criminals and assuming control of Gotham. So everyone's like, okay, what's going on? Batman's like, what's going on here? And how does he know so much about me and like my fighting skills? So then so at one point he's going across, Batman's trying to deduce who he is. And then when he starts to pick up on it might be Jason, he even goes to like all of the characters that have died and come back to life, like Oliver Queen, Superman, saying, is this possible? He even goes to Zatanna, and by this is after Identity Crisis when they had mind wipe Batman. What's kind of funny is that Zatanna goes, why did you come to me? And he goes, I had to come to people I could trust, ... And you were the only one available. So basically he's like, I don't trust anyone. So then he finds out it's Jason Todd. Because what happened is, and this is during Infinite Crisis, so what happens is Superboy Prime, Earth 2 Lois, and Earth 2 Superman were in the Paradise Dimension. And the Paradise Dimension, they've watched everything that's been going on with DC and how it became more dark. So Superboy got so frustrated that he started punching the walls of reality. And that sent ripples. And one of those ripples revived Jason Todd from the dead.
Wow.
That's the most comic book thing ever. They would later retcon it in the New 52, by the way, that no, what happened is he showed up, is that Talia was so upset that Jason died that he put him in the Lazarus pit and he came back to life. That's more or less what happens here. So
that makes more sense.
That makes way more sense, exactly, in Batman. So he shows up, and he's like, okay. But at first, Batman's like, I'm sorry, I couldn't save you, Jason. And then Jason goes, is that what you think this is about? Bruce, I forgive you for letting me die. But the one thing I don't get is why is that piece of garbage alive and Red Hood had captured the Joker? It was kind of interesting. The Red Hood was the Joker's old identity before he became the Joker. He was the Red Hood. And that's the cool part about that. And they established that in the Killing Joke. So what happens is he goes, Bruce, why didn't you kill him? And then, but this is where we get the stupid Batman logic of, if I kill one person, I'm going to kill everyone. But then he goes, I'm not talking about killing Penguin or Two-Face, but how about him? After the graveyards he's killed, the friends he's crippled, referencing Barbara Gordon, and me, I would think I would have been the last straw. So why is he still alive? And then Batman's like, I'm sorry, I can't kill him for some reason. And this is when, this is what really annoys me about the Batman character, is that he's so married to that I don't kill, or I will keep killing. But the problem is he's in life and death scenarios every single day, and you can't tell me he doesn't kill people. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. But regardless, Jason vanishes after the storyline. Then we get the introduction of Damian Wayne, as you mentioned, with the Grant Morrison run, which gets really, like, his origin is really, like, not okay. And he gets a mixed reception, because when he showed up, he was kind of an a-hole to everyone. In fact, the way he got the Robin costume is he beat up Tim Drake and took the costume. So what happens
he was a real brat.
He was.
He was a real brat. But the thing is, with Damian, he was supposed to die. Like, after Morrison was done with whatever he was doing with his run, Damian was supposed to die, and that will be the end of the character. Keeping him around, honestly, he was a brat, unlikable. Even the characters themselves was written to not like him. So I don't really know the point of Damian, especially when for so long they kept Talia in that unlikable, characterized state. But yeah, I still don't really like Damian. I like his character now, because they have, toned down that brattiness, and he's more so like just a kid who kind of just doesn't have a normalcy, and he's wise beyond his years. He's like, I don't know, a 30-year-old in a 13-year-old body or something like that. So something like that. But I don't like Damian, because he is the reason why John exists and why Trinity exists.
Yeah, exactly. But
it's just so it's so surface level and pointless to have them when Damian doesn't supposed to exist, and the fact that they are still trying to put Damian in the villain role, like,
sort of. It depends on the writer, though.
Yeah, even if he becomes Batman, he's first. Again, if you have legacy characters, make them their own character. You don't need a new Batman. You don't need. Yeah, Dick Grayson, he did take over the mantle for a time.
I'm getting to that.
But that was when Bruce was presumed dead and everything like that. So that was fine. But then Dick Grayson's identity is to be Nightwing. Tim Drake is to be Red Robin. Jason is to be Red Hood. Damian can be just Damian, or how Kingdom Come introduced him. I think his name was Ian, or not Ian. It was
Ivan Zufrosh.
Yeah, something like that. But he became his own person, and he was more in line. He wasn't so much as an assassin, but he still, like, had his mother's culture in him.
True,
more
that.
So than trying to just be a Wayne.
Yeah, he was more of like the assassin. And that was part of, honestly, the fun of him being raised by Batman, because he had to, like, deal with, like, being an assassin, and Batman had to teach him, hey, like, justice, not vengeance, and you can't always kill people, even though you kind of can. But anyway, so Batman dies. Batman dies in Final Crisis. And then they have the storyline called Battle for the Cowl, where each of the Bat family are trying to decide who takes over the mantle of Batman. And then Jason tries, and obviously that's a horrible idea. And then Dick Grayson has to come out and fight him, and then he has to be Batman now. Now, the thing is, he takes Damian as his Robin, and it leads to honestly one of the most fun eras of DC, because you have Dick Grayson, who's like a more happy Batman. Then you have Damian, who's like totally like to the point, logical, and trying to like. They're basically, this is where Dick Grayson and Damian actually bond really well, and this is why of all of the Bat Family members, Damian trusts Grayson the most because of this particular era. And then this is also where you would get like Batman Incorporated, where Bruce goes all around the world and tries to create like Batmans all over the world to sort of say like everyone will be under my protection, but I'll have like all these different agents throughout the world. And then you get there's so many storylines in the Grant Morrison run. There's too many to bring up now, but there is one that's being referenced now called R.I.P., where so Batman had created a backup system in his mind, an entirely other personality that would take over if Bruce Wayne were ever compromised. It's basically Batman without Bruce Wayne. And this is when Zur-En-Arc was created. It's the one that has that very colorful suit, and he fights like this person that comes back to life and thinks he's Thomas Wayne, so he fights that person. And then with like Dick Grayson, this is when you also had Red Hood being the villain for Dick Grayson's Batman. So it's actually really cool to have like a former Robin be the bad guy, and he even has like the old Red Hood costume for the Joker. So there's like a lot of really cool stuff in this. So that is post-crisis Batman. So what do you think?
Honestly, yeah. Like I said with Green Lantern, I can honestly tell why Batman was not rebooted and why they could continue the storylines. And like I said, with Damian, he is now a good addition to the family because they all are mentally unhinged. He can be a brat, but yeah, I do like his relationship with Dick Grayson because he it's kind of like, the older sibling, younger brother, and they do have that dynamic as me, like we spoke earlier, I am the oldest sibling, and then I have my younger sibling, and she's very much a brat. So, yeah, that totally works. But the thing is, with Damien, he works for the Bat family. With trying to have the super sons, it doesn't work, especially because John does not have a personality of his own, and he's only leeching off of Damien.
Well, not only that, see, the Bat family has this issue with DC editorial where they think if it works for the Bat family, it'll work for everyone, which is
exactly.
The Bat family is the reason why we have the Flash family and the Superman family. And I'm like, it only works. It doesn't work when everyone on the family has God powers, because why does anyone try to commit crime? At least with like the Bat family, any one of those people could be shot and killed at any moment.
Right. And the thing is, and that's another thing that Diana disagrees with is, I know that it was mentioned in Young Justice, but I believe it's also mentioned in the comics. But she thinks of the Robins sometimes as like child soldiers, and I believe even Batman has referenced the Robins as like soldiers or whatever. And even if she was trained as a young age as a trained fighter, she wasn't a soldier. And to put kids in danger, even though if they were like 13 or whatever, still weird. And so having the Robins, the thing is, Batman wants them to not be him, to be better than him, which is a very good, standing. And again, they all have different personalities. Even with having Batgirls, they all different ages and different personalities, different appearances, but they can all be individual characters and they can sustain an interest. With
Yeah.
the Superman family, again, they all become redundant. They don't really have much much of a story unless you do have Kara go all out to a different world,
Like that Tom
out in
King book,
space.
which honestly
Yeah,
it's not that bad. She
yeah.
curses a lot, but I'm like,
I mean,
not
that's
bad.
Tom King. He has
It's
people
Tom King.
cursed in
Characters curse like a freaking sailor.
Yeah. Connor, uh, for Rebirth to have John exist, Connor basically they made his name derogatory, as in Con. He's an abomination. He doesn't belong.
Let's like put it this way: they never brought him back until Bendis took
Bendis.
over Superman,
Yeah,
but that's just because Bendis was trying to bring back the era of Superman that he liked, and that's why he had like the '90s haircut with the leather jacket and everything like that,
exactly.
which I
Yeah,
hate. But I'm like, you just made John redundant. Thanks a lot, dude. The reason why John exists is because they're trying to get rid of Connor.
exactly. Yeah, Connor could not exist because, and then with the fact that they wanted to age up John to be Connor's age,
Yeah,
which is
that makes it
like,
even more redundant.
yeah. So, and now John is actually older than Connor now, which is even weirder.
It is.
Because I think John is now 20
Mm-hmm.
and Connor is only like 17 or 18. So, yeah, so you have Connor not knowing his place, and he had a 6-issue mini a few months ago that was trying to basically show his worth to the family, but he really didn't. He basically went off to space like everybody else does to show their worth to the Superman family, comes back and Clark accepts them, but that's it. Like they are accepted, sure, but it's no type of actual family togetherness. You have uh, John Henry
Mm-hmm.
still with his niece and Lena. I believe they are engaged to be married,
Yeah.
but no one actually cares for that.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, that the thing is, what's weird is that was introduced from the New 52, and it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like you kept that relationship that's kind of like nobody cared for, and trying to make it a big deal, and still nobody cares for it.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing of Clark and Diana's relationship, you want to ignore it. It's stupid. Um, then you have the twins, which again were said to be replacements of, like, to be 10 years old, replacements for John, and even them, they are redundant. They supposed to have these names, Red Sun and Star Child, but no one, I don't think, is going to. Red Sun, you think of the book Red Sun, Superman Red Sun, the
Mm-hmm.
Elseworlds. Star Child, I mean, you can't have that name when you grow older as a superhero. You can't have that name, Star Child.
Yeah, that's the problem with having all these characters named Wonder Girl, Superboy, and I'm like,
Yeah,
how long
at
are they
some
gonna
point,
be that way?
yeah, at some point, even Hawk Girl, at some point, you have to be old enough to change your name.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so they have their costumes, they just have the S, but I believe they are of a different family. So it's kind of like, why didn't they have their family crest instead of the L? I know that
No,
Superman is
they're
a
still Supergirl is of the House of L.
yeah, no, the twins.
Oh, the twins. I think it's just because that Superman adopted them, maybe, but still, it's kind of
But even
odd.
yeah, but even still, like, well, I think Philip Kennedy, he wanted to give them American Earth names, which I still don't know why, because to make them
He's
unique,
trying to
why give
force
them?
the. Well, it's also hey, well, why does Clark Kent have these kids that have Kryptonian names?
Yeah. Well, actually, the world is supposed to know that he adopted these alien kids.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so in which case, yeah, that doesn't make sense. It's just more of like them using Lois to ignore alien heritages, which also gets down to why Lois as a love interest for Superman just it doesn't work. It would be better. A better use for Lois could be like she's constantly trying to expose who Superman is. It's like she's like a antagonist in
Antagonist.
terms of the media. It's like Superman constantly has to, I guess, operate with this albatross hanging over his head that someday she may figure out who I am and expose me to the public. They did that in the New 52.
Right. Yeah, even with Lois, I mean the twins, you don't throughout this time of them being adopted, it says that they were adopted by Lois and Clark, but you don't see them actually interacting with Lois. The first time she's with them, she takes them to the zoo, which is kind of weird and very tone deaf because
They
they
were in
were
prisons.
in prisons, cages. So it's kind of like you taking them to a zoo with animals in cages, and they are going to, and they actually did compare that. Um, and they were bored with it, or then you don't see them actually interact as a family. Kara talks to them and tells them stories about Krypton, and she is the one that's pretty much like a caretaker to them. Then it was another issue where the girl, she fights at school because her brother is being bullied, and Lois says, instead of consoling her as a mother or understanding why she fought and like she's being bullied, she basically says, we don't fight in this family, and something like that.
Or
She
I think
basically,
she actually goes, I know you fought where you came from, but you don't fight here. And I'm like,
yeah. And it's
whoa.
like, where I came from was I was fighting for my life. Like, so to belittle that seemed so, do you not know what you're saying? And then for Philip, do you not know what you just wrote? That's kind of weird to write that. Then another issue was he was trying to force the idea of Clark saying that that's my daughter and for her to call him dad and stuff like that. But you don't really have any type of build up to that. It's just they're there, that they're adopted. But you don't see them get adopted. You don't see them actually coming into the
Show, but don't
coming
tell.
yeah. Then you have when the boy, he wants to be consoled, it's Kara that's consoling him, and only Lois, she just like put her hand on his shoulder, but she's not consoling him as a mother. And it's kind of like, that's the thing, Lois isn't motherly. She doesn't have any type of connection to the family. She's just there, and she does go in the background because you have these supers, and she's basically useless in a family of supers.
Oh,
Um,
yay. I've always said Lois is useless. I really appreciate that. But anyway, we do have to wrap up because we just passed 3 hours. Yay, two in
oh
a row.
wow,
But
yeah,
so again, post crisis has its pluses and minuses. Pluses certainly Green Lantern and Batman. Minuses for the most
everything else
part,
kind of.
yeah,
I
because
mean,
yeah, go
they've
ahead.
introduced they've introduced some great characters. It's just the fact that the characters are so belittled, and like the writers are just not creative enough to really give the full potential of the characters.
Exactly, and that's arguably what the new 52 was in its heyday, was them getting that potential. But so it's drop in the comments, by the way, everyone, your thoughts on everything we've said, who your favorite Green Lantern character is, what's your favorite Green Lantern story. If you agree with us about Superman and Wonder Woman, as long as you're several. Put them comments down there, ladies and gents. So Britt, do you have any stories you want to tease us with?
Okay, so I have, of course, the one where Diana's sick and Cal and Hippolyta are taking care of her, Hippolyta being the matchmaker. Have more one shots that I'm slowly, finishing up, editing. And then, of course, we have our big roller coaster of emotions
Universe
that I
at
can't
this
wait
point.
to share. Yeah, it is. Within 3 weeks, we have built an entire universe, and it's very exciting to get to finishing the first chapter now and then starting the second, and the constant I got an idea, or things that we're talking about, and now I'm getting you back now because I'm thinking of the emotional things that you said. So it's kind of like, I'm gonna get you back with some stuff, and
It's working. Trust me.
and the more that I'm putting the details in just a few more of the first chapter, it's like, aha, I have more ideas. And it's some stuff that I have not showed because I wanted it to be a surprise for you to read it in full. But this first chapter is going to be very interesting when we share it.
Oh boy, this would be really fun. So anyway, stay heroic, folks, and let's have a fantastic 2024.